right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Are all of our panelists, you guys, everybody all set? Sierra's all set. We have another talking head today. So since Sierra's up there by herself right now, it's Sierra Enge. She is actually, not actually, she is a professional soccer player over in France right now. So yesterday we had Italy. Today we have France. Can you hear us okay, Sierra?
Yeah, it's great. Sorry, my head is so big.
Okay. So we just had a discussion, and I said everybody out here is already used to me butchering all my introductions. So I'm not even going to bother to try all that much, but I'm going to introduce Joy uh, Avedesdian. At least I got that right so far. I did. I got that right. So Joy Stellarix is the owner and CEO of Stellarix. It's a financial services firm. Am I doing all right? Doing all right. Also a former, not that long ago, UC-Irvine soccer player. And so Joy is going to take it over from here so I can stop.
This one's not on. Can I trade you for a sec? There we go. I'll have you know, Big West Champions 97, everybody. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Thanks, Matt. Thank you so much for having us, and Brittany too. Brittany's been running around. Claudia also for checking us all in. So thanks for having this particular panel. It's really refreshing to have a panel that's focused on female athletes. And so we're going to kind of jump into it. Before we do, though, I'd like to introduce who we have here, just an incredible group. We'll start with Jen Anderson-Ehrlic. Forgive me. Ehrlic, I got it right? Okay, good. She's the executive director of Sportswomen of Colorado, and also a former athlete like me not that long ago. And we're so grateful that you were able to make this appearance. Jen, thanks. I know you're in the middle of planning your own big annual event. So excellent. Great having you here. We've also got Dr. Lauryn Roth. She's the assistant professor and pediatric and adolescent gynecology professor with University of Colorado. And of course, we have Aubrey, Dr. Aubrey Armento, primary care sports medicine physician and researcher with the University of Colorado School of Medicine. So let's give a quick round of applause for our panel. Also athletes. I heard that Dr. Aubrey actually won about 100. Is that right? You have 100 records? It went from 80 to 100. So, okay. So you guys, this is 2026, so you can certainly look these ladies up on LinkedIn or connect with them and find out more about their backgrounds and passions. I don't want to miss Sierra here behind us, who is currently in France playing soccer and is also with the National Women's Soccer League with the San Diego Wave. She played soccer at Stanford. So we kind of have a few different generations of athletes on this panel. And Sierra, I'm actually going to start with you. And you're currently living inside kind of a high-level sports environment right now. And looking back at, how old are you now, Sierra?
I'm actually about to turn 26 on Monday.
So she'll be 26 on Monday. Happy birthday.
Thank
When
you.
did soccer stop being just something that you played and actually became part of your identity?
Yeah, well, first of all, super excited to be here. Thank you everyone for coming and showing up. I wish I could be there in person, but glad I can participate online. But yeah, I grew up in a sports family. I had an older brother. Also, can you guys hear me? Okay.
You're okay? All right.
Okay.
Can we
Um,
just a bit?
Yeah, so I grew up in a sports family. Both my parents played sports in college, and I had an older brother. So growing up, I really jumped in and played a lot of different things. I played, school basketball team. I played lacrosse. I played volleyball. I played soccer. I played all of it. I played softball. I was horrible. But I loved just playing sports, and I think it was such a great way for me to meet new people, connect with my peers, and also just experiment and kind of see what I loved and what I enjoyed. And I'm super grateful to my parents for kind of just letting me try a bunch of things and figure out what worked for me. So yeah, I think it was about probably um, when I was going into middle school, maybe the end of my elementary school time, where I really kind of realized that soccer was something that I loved more than the other things. And it kind of became pretty clear because the other sports fell away and it really was soccer and lacrosse. And then in high school, I was like, okay, I can't do both. I have to focus on one. And my after my freshman year, I just exclusively played soccer, but I think it was really kind of going, when I was 11, 12, 13, where I started to realize like, oh, I'm actually good at this. And it was something that, first of all, and most importantly, brought me a lot of joy. But I think then once you start to get good at it and people kind of see you play and give you that external reinforcement and that external, gratification, you start to see yourself as a soccer player. And so I feel like that was really when I viewed myself as a soccer player and I wanted to grow in that area and I loved that identity, but it was also, yeah, a very big part of how I viewed myself.
Excellent. Thank you. And we're going to circle back to that. You guys will see how we kind of round that out later in our panel. Jen, you now lead an organization supporting women in sport, but you also lived this personally. When you were younger, what messages did you absorb about worth and performance that you didn't even realize were shaping you?
Oof. You guys, is that working? Okay. That's a deep question, actually. It's so it's so intertwined. I think the beautiful thing about sport and what it teaches you failure, but it also teaches you success through the failure. I didn't realize I too played numerous sports. I played 4 sports actually, all through high school. I'm older, and I grew up in Iowa in a small town, and we were all just gym rats. And that's what we did. And peer pressure, I think at young, impressionable ages can go the positive route or it can go the negative route. And the really beautiful thing for me growing up was the peer pressure was the positive route in sports. And through all of the experiences, wins, losses, all of that was just shaping me kind of unbeknownst to me. And I don't think that there's anything other than athletics and sport that can teach that in such an authentic and organic way that before you know it, you're suddenly a leader by example, or you're a vocal leader, or you're passionate about it. And I don't know if I hit on all of those points, Joy, but the one thing that is so important to me now is there are high school athletes doing amazing things across the state of Colorado. There's professionals, there's masters athletes in Colorado that are setting world records, and 100, winners of ultra races sitting to the left of me. And there's just all these incredible things going on. And in all of it ties back to sports for me. And it's really important that the positive moments are shared in my mind and not just the negative. Because when you play a sport, you fail far more than what you succeed.
So, Dr. Aubrey, you see athletes in your clinic every day. At what age do you start noticing identity attachment to performance? We heard Jen just talk about becoming a leader, and she kind of touched on some of that. When do you start seeing that? Around what age do you start seeing an identity kind of attachment?
Yeah, I'm not so sure it's necessarily age, but more so, in my opinion, when kids start to sport specialize is when I start to see more of that identity tied to being an athlete and into their performance. I think when kids are playing multiple different sports and have more of that variety, they're not necessarily, they may identify as an athlete, but they may not necessarily identify as a soccer player or as a runner, for example. And I think that variety sort of allows for maybe a little bit less attachment to performance. And then once you start to specialize, right, you're sort of dropping all these other sports to focus on one sport. And so I just think that ups the ante a little bit as far as expectations go. Like if you're not going to do these other sports and you're going to focus on this, then that's what you're going to be good at. You should be good at that. And I think that that's where the pressure to perform, at least from what I see, tends to go up.
It's such a great point because here we are just, just a few years out of college, still identifying in my case as a soccer player. And, although what I heard Sarah say and Jen is that we played many sports, but then we kind of dialed in which one we were going to be focusing on. So Dr. Lauryn, I was wondering from your point of view as an OB/GYN, when do you see the changes hormonally and also psychologically? Is there kind of a sign that adults kind of miss in your experience and research that coaches, care providers can be kind of paying a little bit closer attention to? Are there signs that you'd recommend?
You're picking all the big questions. I'll try to take it in chunks. I'll just say first off, like bodies change at different times. And so some people enter puberty at a younger age. For some people, it's a little bit later. But I think we can all agree that that change is rough, okay? It's like big changes in the body physically, emotionally, and there's just so many things at play. But especially in female bodies, I think those hormonal changes can be really challenging, partially because like in female bodies, those hormonal changes, they're fluctuating. Sometimes those hormones are high, sometimes they're low. They are all over the place. And you've got this adolescent body that is just trying to figure out how to move these new gangly limbs and then also how to modulate these new feelings and emotions that are happening. And so I think to the second part of your question, like what should parents and coaches and caregivers be looking for? Oh gosh, look for everything. It's just, I think the single most important thing that I see in families and in patients where things are going well is an open line of communication. This kid knows that they can come to you and ask you anything. Doesn't matter if it's something you disagree with. It doesn't matter if it's something you told them not to do. They know that they can come to you because you are a safe space and you will always be there to listen. And so I think for like, just to try to sum this up, adolescence is really hard. And there's a lot of things that can derail a kid. And so you as that caregiver, as that parent, as that coach, as that trusted adult figure can really keep them on a safe path.
So as a follow-up, what are adolescent young women feeling that they don't have words for yet in your experience?
There's a spectrum. I have some girls that come in really mad that nobody's talked to them about these things before, that nobody's explained to them what's happening in their bodies and why they're having periods or why they're having these big physical symptom changes or even big mood changes in that week leading up to their period. They had no idea that this was going on and they felt crazy, that they're having these feelings. So like I've got girls coming in mad, angry, confused. I have girls coming in sad. They're like, my body is changing. All of a sudden, I don't look like I'm 12 anymore. I look like I'm 17, and my athletic performance, they perceive that their athletic performance is changing because of these physical changes. So I have girls that are sad and frustrated. And then I also have girls that I feel like just come in lost, where they're like, they're trying to make sense of all of this and they're trying to exert control on something that I promise you cannot control puberty. It is uncontrollable. They're trying to exert control over that. And all of a sudden we find ourselves dealing with an eating disorder because that's how they can exert control over this very chaotic life.
Wow, thanks for that insight. And Dr. Aubrey, we often treat the injury, but how often is the injury actually related or a signal of something deeper, kind of like what Dr. Lauryn's talking about, physically or emotionally?
It's often something deeper than that. I mean, I think that's why we have the program that we have, which is this, multidisciplinary program with myself and Lauryn and a sports dietitian and bringing in other experts, because we don't want to just treat the injury. You want to treat the whole picture and the whole person. And I think oftentimes an injury occurs, there's all kinds of reasons why injuries happen, right? But when we think about especially certain types of injuries, like for example, bone stress injuries, there's often some sort of nutrition or hormonal factor playing a role there. And we're kind of doing a disservice to our patients if we're not investigating other things besides just the injury that's in front of you. So it's really important, I think, to consider the whole person. And oftentimes that injury can be a sign that something else might be going on, or when someone is injured, they may be more at risk to develop some more along the lines of mental health concerns, right? Like struggling with injury and being out of sport can be very challenging from a mental perspective. So we want to make sure that we're supporting that athlete through their injury recovery, both physically and mentally, emotionally, psychologically.
Can you tell us more about the program you just referenced?
Sure. So we have a female athlete program at Children's Hospital Colorado. It is an interdisciplinary program with myself in sports medicine, Lauryn in gynecology, and a sports dietitian. So families come in and see all three of us in one visit, and then we connect them to other resources as needed outside of our clinic. But we see a lot of patients, as Lauryn's describing, young female athletes progressing through puberty, struggling with injury, menstrual concerns, nutrition concerns. They're also interconnected. And so we're able to provide that support in a collaborative team environment.
I don't know how many of you in the audience wish they had something like this accessible when they were younger, or athletes, or even available to your athletes many decades ago. Jen, where do you see systems from your point of view as the CEO of Sportswomen of Colorado? Where do you see systems like coaches, schools, organizations unintentionally reinforcing silence in female athletes?
Joy, these are tough questions. I'm a mom of a 13-year-old daughter. So as I sit and listen to you both, this all just really hits home. She's all over the place emotionally. I think first and foremost, people are almost always well-intentioned. I never think that people are ill-intentioned majority of the time. With that being said, there's a lot of pressure on these athletes from middle school to high school. I think sport specialization, we know from a science and database perspective that sport specialization can be harmful, especially when too soon. And unfortunately, it's really hard as parents to not have your child specialize for a multitude of reasons. There's barriers like transportation, field access, or gym access. In Denver specifically, we have all these resources, but maybe gym space isn't available until 7:00 at night. So you have a 12-year-old who is practicing from 8 to 9:30 at night and has to be at school at 7:45 in the morning, or leave the house at 6:45 in the morning, early times. That to me is crazy. You're driving all over the place for limited, maybe soccer fields. You take your kids to a soccer tournament in Utah, for example. I experienced this to play some Colorado teams in Utah. So there's this cost monetization where I think people are well-intentioned, but it's not accessible to everyone. And it forces people to maybe specialize before they're ready. And then I could go on forever on this. You have the social media component, whether it's positive or negative. They're under a spotlight all the time. And the other example that I would give is if a kid is really excelling, I've seen it in middle school where the coach will say, like, you can't shoot that layup. You need to pass the ball. And then you're taking a kid who's really good and basically saying, if you were academic and you were winning every spelling bee, you would say, don't spell that word properly. So I actually know an athletic director who told a little 12-year-old girl to not score as many points. So for a 12-year-old girl to hear that when she's passionate and she's just loving the sport, it's taking the fun out of it. And then they're very confused. I think playing for your middle school and high school team is really important. And I'm not sure that that's always a priority either.
That's a great example, Jen. Thanks. For Dr. Lauryn, what do adults praise in girls that might actually be a warning sign?
Okay, we're diving in. I think, again, with the best of intentions, people try to give feedback and support. And sometimes it just misses the mark, or sometimes it lands different in that brain. It gets registered differently. I think this is unique to every sport. And so the sports that I'll focus on are the ones that I grew up in. I was a figure skater for 7 years, and then I specialized more full-time into swimming and water polo. But I mean, I think there's a lot of praise and focus about the appearance of bodies, about how that body moves. You see that more in figure skating, dancing, gymnastics. And then there's an idealization of certain body types. And I think, again, with the best of intentions, you might tell somebody, oh my gosh, wow, you performed so beautifully. That was so graceful. And, you know, your costume, your outfit, that fit so perfectly. Wow, what a great performance. And you might have said that, not realizing that they just came off of a really terrible GI bug and they'd lost 15 pounds because of this GI bug. And now all of a sudden it's registered in their head, oh, wow, when I weigh this size, when I'm this size, when I weigh this amount, I'm better. I'm getting better performance. I'm getting higher scores. And so like, that's just a body type, body image. That's an accidental one that is really common.
That's an excellent example. Dr. Aubrey, can you add to that?
Yeah, I think the idealization of body type for sure is a big one we see, and some of seemingly offhand remarks often land very heavily and have a profound impact. And that tie to I'm getting feedback on, you know, I'm told that I look leaner or I look stronger, like emphasis on body appearance and correlations in someone's brain of like positive performance, right? And that link can be really hard to deconstruct when someone's coming in. And then I think in an adolescent where their body is changing, right? We want to normalize the body changes that happen through puberty. And part of going through puberty as a female is to gain weight and for your hips to get, you know, enlarged, right? Like these are normal things that we want to have happen, but sometimes we can see temporary declines in sports performance as somebody works to catch up, basically adjust to their changing body. It doesn't mean that that's a forever thing, but oftentimes people sort of may experience that performance slump and then say, oh, it's because I am heavier and I have boobs now and like I'm going to try to fight puberty. And then that can become really destructive too. And so, yeah, we spend a lot of time trying to normalize puberty because I think it's really important for athletes to hear that and to understand the detrimental consequences that can come from not allowing your body to progress through puberty and low estrogen. So I would say, yeah, a lot of those offhand comments around body type and body appearance that often get tied to performance that athletes really kind of stick to.
And so as a follow-up, how often do you work with the athletes, but also their parents? And how are you coaching and working with their parents?
Sometimes the parents,
visit.
yeah, the parents sometimes be harder than working with the athlete. We're providing education to the whole unit, right? So I think you have to sort of tailor your talk to the athlete, but then also, I mean, we have a lot of parents that come in with, you know, sort of incorrect beliefs about what is normal about puberty. And so it's, you know, re-educating them too. And especially like we haven't even really talked about nutrition yet, but like don't get me started about just everything that is out there in the social media world on nutrition, what you should and shouldn't do, and demonizing XYZ. And so a lot of our time, and this is where having our sports dietitian is amazing, is providing some more education on like what is proper nutrition for a young growing female athlete, right? Which is very different than the general population.
Let's go there for a second, though. Where would somebody find the proper resources for nutrition for their adolescent athlete or maybe a player on their team?
Ideally, if you can have access to a sports dietitian who works with young athletes, that's going to be the best resource. There are some nice nutrition resources through like the USOPC online. They have like the athlete plate, if you haven't heard of that. It's basically like how to build your plate out based on your level of training, which I think is a nice resource. And then when we think about social media, right, generally wanting to follow and role model athletes that are demonstrating like positive relationships with food and their body. The whole like wellness, fitness influencer space can be really dark and don't usually recommend anybody going down that rabbit hole. So really trying to kind of emphasize those like positive female role models from an athlete perspective on social media. And yeah, really just trying to like lean into some of those experts, although I know in this day and age it can be hard to understand who is an expert, right? But ideally like a sports dietitian and leaning into some of those more qualified resources.
So Sierra, you're an active, competitive athlete. What's the nutritional training that you're getting in real time right now? When is it coaching? Are there people on the staff that talk to you about your particular body and nutrition? Walk us through what an athlete today is experiencing.
Yeah, I think for me, I really just started to learn more about nutrition when I was in college and now professionally because we had access to a dietitian that we were all encouraged to work with. And I think it changes a lot, to be honest. Like it's definitely different here in France, even in terms of like things that they encourage you to eat and, just, but at the end of the day, like it all comes down to the same things, like making sure you're getting your carbs in, making sure you're getting your proteins and making sure you're getting your vegetables. And I think it's also just really important to understand that like food is fuel, and if you don't fuel your body, you're not going to perform. And like, yes, you can eat a little bit and maybe you feel okay for a day or two, but like it's not sustainable. And so really for me, I try to view food as like this is something that I enjoy. I enjoy food, I enjoy eating it, and also like I know it's helping my body and it's powering my body. And if I don't eat it, it's going to be quite detrimental. But I do think it is challenging because I do remember when I first got to Stanford, you are all of a sudden like I ate meals with my family before and I ate meals sometimes out with my friends, but like then you go to this environment where you're eating meals with just your peers every single day, every single meal. And I definitely felt myself kind of like looking at, oh, that's interesting. Like that person only took this much or that, like comparing to different people, to different sports. And I think it's also just really important to understand that like every person is different. Like I have some girls on the team that really don't love to eat breakfast, even though our dietitianist tells them that they really should. So for breakfast, they'll eat something lighter because they just really don't like to do it. But then for lunch, they'll eat something bigger. And I think just really understanding that like everyone is different and there's different things that work for you. But the most important thing is that you are fueling your body and like reaching out for help if you don't understand what that is. But for athletes, like I eat a lot of food. I have to. I'm always hungry. I feel like you have to lean into that and yeah, know yourself and not compare to others.
And so it's probably a leading question, but do we see these same nutrition and body image issues with our male athlete counterparts? And I know we have a panel coming up in a couple hours. I think the answer is probably sometimes. And would you like to give some color on that? Either of the doctors there?
Yeah, we can certainly see this in male athletes for sure. I think it's probably more under-recognized than it is in female athletes. And so we probably, I think, have sort of an underestimation of how much this is affecting male athletes compared to female athletes. It can present differently, I think, than in female athletes. And I think kind of interesting the difference as a male goes through puberty versus a female, right? Like men, as they progress through puberty, or young men as they progress through puberty, right, their testosterone levels are rising. Like they sort of get performance enhancement as they progress through puberty, right? They get faster and taller and stronger and they build more muscle. And that is different than how a female body is affected going through puberty. And so I think sort of the challenges from a pubertal perspective for these adolescent athletes does vary for sex, by sex. But that does not mean that male athletes are immune to the pressures of body idealization and disordered eating and eating disorders. We certainly can see it, especially in those sports that emphasize more of a lean body physique, like endurance sports, gymnastics, figure skating, sort of the same type of sports that are more high risk for female athletes.
Dr. Lauryn, you want to add to that?
I only really take care of 50% of the population as an OBGYN, but just to echo, yes, these are things that impact all bodies. So it doesn't matter what the sex is. These pressures are real, they're present. So yeah.
Jen?
I'm chomping at the bit. To your point, I was on a podcast with a bunch of ultra runners, and one of the things that came up in our conversation was when you watch, say, College World or like the Little League World Series, the announcers are like, just wait until he grows. Just wait until he grows. Watch gymnastics. Ooh, she grew a little bit this year. So growing, which is puberty, which is inevitable for girls in specific sports, is often viewed as negative. Boys, just wait until he grows.
That's a great point. Okay, Sierra, we've talked about, you've spoken about how soccer is not just who you are. Why does an athlete sometimes need to learn that distinction for their well-being? And I'll give a little plug. I'm doing a session, not after this one, but after, about life after sport. So talk about how important it is for your well-being to realize that you're not just a soccer player.
Yeah, I think it's huge, and I think it takes time to realize it. And I think I kind of went through two periods where I was kind of smacked in the face a little bit with it. I think when I tore my ACL in high school, and that's about a year out of, for me, it was a year out of the sport. And I think, you grow up and you hear, the other woman on the panel talked about, you hear these things and I'm introduced as, oh, this is Sierra, the soccer player, and oh, this is Sierra, like she's really good at soccer. Like you are kind of, society reinforces this identity of you as like, oh, I'm a soccer player, I'm a soccer player. And before I tore my ACL, like everything I did was, okay, how do I get better? How am I sleeping enough? How am I doing this? How, like I had nothing outside of my sport. And I truly viewed myself like, okay, this is where my worth comes from. And when I did not have a good game, I mean, you can call my parents, they probably hated me for the week that, until I played that next game. Like hopefully I then played well in that next game, because otherwise it could stretch on. And so everything revolved around soccer for me. And when I tore my ACL, it was honestly the smack in the face that I needed, because it was so unsustainable. And so during that period, I kind of started to, read more, become more interested in meditation, lean into other hobbies. Yeah, just like learn more about myself and who I am off of the field. And that was incredible for me, and so necessary. And then, I get back into it and it's like, okay, this kind of becomes a little bit my identity. Um, but I think when I started playing professionally, it was another kind of smack in the face, because I loved college, because I was able to be a student, I was able to be a friend, I was able to be involved in all of these communities and also play soccer. And I felt like I was feeding into so many pieces of my identity, and I felt so good on the soccer field, because I was like, oh, I have all these other things, and oh, I make a mistake, like no big deal. I have one bad game, no big deal, because there's all these other things that are really feeding into me and how I value myself and how I view myself. And when I started playing professionally, all of that was gone. It was then again just soccer. And so I quickly realized like this is not healthy for me. And I think it's kind of counterintuitive and something I struggled with at the when I first started my career, and when I was younger, because it feels like, oh, I want to be really good at this sport, and I care a lot about it, and I want to dedicate a lot of time to it. But I think if you're only, focused on yourself as a soccer player and you're killing off every other piece of you, like it actually doesn't help you, and it's actually quite detrimental. And so when I started playing professionally, I was like, all right, how can I get involved? How can I do other things? How can I be, not just a soccer player, and yeah, just be a human being, someone who, enjoys exploring, enjoys cooking, enjoys connecting with their friends, like just viewing myself as more than just what I do, because soccer is something that I love and I spend a lot of time to it. But if it's taken away right now, like I'm confident in who I am and I have an identity outside of that. And I think it takes a while to understand that, but it's something I try to tell young kids as much as possible of like, yes, play your sport, give your all to it, but find other outlets, find other things that bring you joy, because it's necessary for your success and for just your long-term ability to continue doing what you're doing.
That's excellent. You might not realize it yet, but when you're, a couple decades from now, Sarah, you're going to reflect. some of your best memories are going to be snapshots of what you accomplished on the field and off the field. So it's really fun hearing from an active athlete who's playing competitively now. We're going to talk about identity after sport, and that leads to mental toughness. And we're going to talk about that with the panel right now. So Jen, we use the phrase mental toughness constantly in sports. If we're honest, what do we currently call toughness that might actually be distress?
A lot. A lot of things. Listening to Sierra talk, one of the things that I struggled with was rest when I finished playing college athletics. So I played 2 sports the first 2 years of my college, softball and basketball, and then I transferred and just played basketball. Mind you that it's a full-time job. Ignoring when you're sick, ignoring if you're run down, not listening to your body. So the mental toughness, the mind body is connected. You touched on that with, you could get into pain science, you could get into the mind body connection and how they're almost always they are always connected. But learning to ignore things like injury, illness, just being really run down and tired can lead to mental health crises, burnout. And I'm 46. I still struggle and feel guilt when resting. When I'm sick, like an Oura ring was a godsend for me because it was data. And it was like, your biometric data is awful. You really don't need to get on a spin bike for an hour today or go lift weights. I think for me that like there's a time to push and there's a time to pull back. And when you are actively competing, it is grind, grind, grind. And I'm actually thankful for that because when things do get really hard, you don't wither up and disappear. But I've had to learn that resting is okay. I'm not lazy. I'm replenishing. I'm resting.
Great. Dr. Aubrey, would you like to give some perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is often the tendency to push through those things. And in some ways, that's glorified by sport culture. And I totally agree. There's a time to push, but there's also a lot of benefit to listening to your body. I think from my perspective, medically, right, you can lose so much time in sport by pushing that point, right? Rather than like if we just rested for a couple days versus continuing to run on an injury and then suddenly we're out from sport for 3 to 4 months, right? Because we turned something that could be small and easily fixable into a big chronic injury that's going to take a lot more time to recover from. So I think trying to frame some of this, and I think it's hard sometimes for athletes to like see the long game and to see more of those long-term implications, but trying to frame it in the light of like, if we nip this in the bud now, we can hopefully get you back to XYZ sport within a couple weeks versus if you keep pushing and you keep pushing and you keep pushing, we might be out of sport for months, right? We might lose an entire season because of it. And so I think providing some kind of education around the consequences of sort of pushing too far and not giving the body what it needs when it is injured, run down, and needs that recovery. And I always call recovery to all athletes I see, like recovery is part of your training. Mm-hmm. So think about it that way. Like your recovery day is part of your training day, and really trying to emphasize like how much can be gained and how much can be lost when we're not respecting recovery. So yeah.
The athletes that you work with, are you seeing that their ecosystem of parents and coaches, are they receptive to that concept?
Sometimes. I would say most of the time parents are pretty understanding of that. I think especially when you frame more of those like long-term consequences of not giving the body the recovery that it needs. I have some varied experiences with coaches, and I find most coaches, if I can talk with them about it, are pretty receptive to it. But there are certain circumstances where like I provide medical notes to athletes that say like this athlete should have 1 rest day a week and should add a second rest day in I kind of have to spell it out in writing, and you got to do what you got to do to sort of help support that athlete and yeah, the support from coaches and parents can be a little tricky to navigate sometimes.
Okay, we've got one more question for each panelist. We'll start with Dr. Lauryn. If there's one change you would make tomorrow to better protect female athletes' mental health, what would it be? This is where you say, that's a great question. Remember,
That's a
we
great
talked about this.
question. So as a gynecologist, this one's a little bit more like close to me and the things that I care about the most because this is the career I've chosen. But for me, it's education. I want my patients to know about their bodies. I want them to understand what's happening to their bodies, each month as you have a period and as your body continues to change. And I think if we had this education, if we had this understanding, if people had access to good, accurate information that was provided in schools or in educational materials and not from that social media influencer on TikTok who told you to do this detox cleanse. Like they did not go to med school, I promise. I just want my patients to have good information and then I think we can make huge changes.
Says anecdotal. I played, as I've mentioned, in the 90s, and I had this really tough coach. His father was a boxer, I'll put it that way. And he was our women's soccer coach at UC-Irvine. And he was the replacement for a coach who was fired because of a young woman dying on the beach during training the year before. And if we had doctors and support like Jen and you guys, I think we would have, maybe she'd be alive today, who knows? But also we would have had a lot less injury and kind of burnout from sport. And a lot of athletes in those days, as some of you guys can remember, there was no professional league. So that was it. That was their shot. And so you bring up a really good point about exhaustion, understanding the athlete's body, and knowing that there's resources available. So Dr. Aubrey, I'll go to you. What one thing would you change? And if you could also add how somebody would get in touch with your program.
Sure. I would build off of what Lauryn said and a culture of empowerment, because I think I really want to see female athletes feel empowered to speak up, to voice their concerns, to feel like they have a safe space that they can go to with these issues. And I think that empowerment comes from cultivating that within athletes themselves, but also within building systems around them that foster that kind of empowerment. So that's what I would love to see happen. And then as far as getting in touch with us, you can email either of us. We're just Aubrey.Armento, Lauryn.Roth at childrenscolorado.org or cuanschutz.edu, either email. And then we also have a website. If you just Google Children's Colorado Female Athlete Program, you'll find us there.
Can you repeat that? Google what?
Yeah, Children's Colorado Female Athlete Program.
Children's Colorado Female Athlete Program. Okay, thank you. Jen, what's one thing you would change?
I would build off of all of that. And I think of it more as a coaching and organizational structure side, how important relationships are. Relationships are so important as a coach. You might be the best expert in your sport out there, but if you don't have a relationship where your players feel seen and loved and cared about and supported, it doesn't matter. And a lot of people will say that the relationship is the most important for girls or females, but I will tell you, it's just as important for little boys. I've coached both. It's just as important for boys and girls to feel seen and understood. Things happen in kids' lives that in that moment, it is the biggest deal in their world as a young student athlete. And they need to be able to say what's on their mind. And if you can do that, you can also keep sports fun and you can provide feedback that might be hard to hear.
Okay, Sierra, bring us home. What's one thing you would change in the current environment in female sports to support more mental health?
I think what you guys all said. I think the biggest thing is the coaches and right now, the education programs and the way that coaches are taught is just not enough. I had so many coaches who screamed and yelled and did not care about anything that I did off the field. All they cared about is what I showed up, and in that hour and a half or hour that I was there each day, like whatever I was doing on the field. And I think that sports are so powerful, especially for young girls, because they teach us so many incredible lessons, and they can be so much more powerful if these coaches are taught mental, just basic mental training of like, look, this is how you treat someone who's clearly having a hard day. Or like maybe in training, we can spend some of the time, especially as they're younger, working on the sport, but also, just building basic like mental tools, because I think we don't have the terminology as young kids growing up of like how to even express those feelings, how to even talk about them. It doesn't feel like there's necessarily safe spaces to do that. And so I think really like educating coaches is a major thing that can have
That's a great point.
it seems like it's small, but can have, yeah, a pretty broad impact.
Excellent point. Thanks, Sierra. Okay, guys, let's give a round of applause for our panel. Accomplished women, thank you. And Sierra, that includes you. Thank you so much, Matt. I'm going to hand this over to you. And I think you're going to bring up our next guest.
So thank you so much. I think that was Jeff. Can you put Sierra back on the screen? So I know we're supposed to have a 5-minute break, but I'm going to go ahead and move into our next presentation. So pretty much everybody out there is an adult. I know we've got a couple high schoolers, but I'm going to assume that everybody can go up and go to the bathroom whenever they need to. So I'm not going to do a 5-minute break. So I'm going to... What? I know it happens every time. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Do I have to do a 1, 2, 3, eyes on me? 1, 2, 3. Say eyes on me. Yell eyes on me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. Sarah was a teacher. All right. So we're just going to go. I'm going to go ahead and move into the next presentation. Everybody, if you need to take a break, just get up, take a break. I trust that everybody can figure out how to find a bathroom on their own. So the rest of the morning, we got a couple more interesting panels. We're actually from our female specific program, we're going to actually have a male specific panel in a little bit. And then what we're going to talk about right now, actually Jenna is going to talk about right now, is sort of the connection between military and athletics, and sort of how we can take things that we've learned from the military environment and apply it to athletics, because culture is very similar. So Jenna's going to talk a little bit about stress first aid. Do you want me to introduce you, or you want to? All right. I'm going to let Jenna introduce herself so we can just move on. Whichever one you want. Turn it on. There you go. And make sure that works. 5-minute warning. So you have like 25 and then a couple minutes of conversation.
Okay, everybody, hopefully you got some more coffee. I am a free range presenter and I can't stand to be behind a podium. So hopefully I don't fall off the stage, although that could wake everybody up. So my name is Jenna Ermold, and I'm going to start with a story. I don't know if Bella's here, but I promise I actually had this story as a part of my talk before we had the great presentation on storytelling. So my story is that I have been in the field of military mental health, first as an Air Force psychologist for a number of years, and then for the rest of the time under the Department of Defense for the Center for Deployment Psychology. And in my experience, in my line of work, I deal with things like training people how to treat PTSD and insomnia and occupational stress, ops tempos, things like that. I love what I do. I love the population I work with. It's been amazing. And last year, actually, at the first annual conference, I came to attend mostly because that's my husband and that's like the nice thing to do, right? Like support your spouse. And I'm like, all right, I'll learn a little something. It'll be interesting. And I actually sat there dumbfounded the entire time because all I kept thinking was, holy cow, these cultures are so incredibly similar. So we're going to play a little game. I don't want you falling asleep back there. It's, kind of mid-morning. So I'm going to have you participate with me a little bit and play a game. So what I want you to do is shout out positive adjectives that tend to be used when we describe athletes. What are some positive adjectives? Shout them out. Strong, driven, competent, ambitious, hardworking, persistent, competitive, brave, motivated. Okay, excellent. These are great. All right, now the hard ones. How about some negative adjectives that might be used? Perfectionistic. Sorry? Overthinking. People pleasing. Rigid. Injured. I didn't hear, there was one over here I didn't hear. Lazy. Overconfident. Obsessed. What else? Any other negative ones? Egocentric. Great. Self-absorbed. Okay. Damaged, right? All sorts of rigid. You did a great job. So you proved my point because that's this was the language I was hearing where I was thinking again, like, this is really familiar to me. And it's true, right? We have these positive adjectives that, when I train a lot on military culture, same kind of thing, right? We're hearing these same kind of adjectives: loyal, determined, disciplined, confident, elite, motivated, team-oriented. We didn't get that one. Tough, prepared. On the negative side, drained. I forgot I've got a screen there. Drained, exhausted, burnout, overcommitted, injured, lonely, anxious, isolated, perfectionistic, exhausted. So tons of crossover. And then I started thinking even more about it and was really looking at what about like the types of stressors or the really important domains in life. Is there some similarity there? And there really is, right? In sport, athletes are mission driven. There's a lot of performance pressure. Same thing in the military. Team dynamics. It's, the unit first, the team first. So again, tons of similarities there. The physical demands, we've been talking about that for the last couple of days. Just the physical demands, hearing from athletes who have been injured. It's almost like not if you get injured, but when you get injured, and it's very similar for service members. Sleep schedules. We haven't talked a ton about sleep, a little bit about rest. But just part and parcel of being an athlete, traveling, when your practices, things like that, there's a ton of sleep disruption. Obviously with military, we've got deployments, different shifts that people get put on. Identity is a huge one. And I've heard this over and over the past couple of days. And, I think Sierra did a really nice job of saying, I was introduced as, this is Sierra, she's a soccer player. I do feel like during this conference, this is Jenna, she's Matt's wife. So I feel like that's been my whole identity of this conference. But usually I'm Paxton's mom or whatever. But anyway, identity is huge, and transitions, identity loss, identity changes are big times when we need to look out for this population, because that's when risk increases significantly for military, whether it's injury, whether it's separation from service, whether it's retirement. These are huge areas for us to pay attention to. Both highly stigmatized populations, or, there's a lot of stigma about help seeking, mental health, what it means to access care. And we just talked about social media, a lot of public scrutiny on both populations. So are we kind of in agreement? There's a lot of crossover and similarities. Do I need to do a lot more convincing? Okay. So when we talk about culture, things that make up a culture, there's things like beliefs and values, customs, traditions, uniform, what somebody wears. So again, more crossover there with culture. But one of the most important features of culture are values. So what are the values and ideals that kind of shape the culture, shape the ethos of being in the culture, and then shape somebody's worldview, the lens that they look at the world through. These are some values and ideals that are also common for both military members and athletes. So we've got that stoicism and emotional control. Again, can be really adaptive. For service members, if we had you emoting all over the place when you're deployed, that would put you at risk. That would make you unsafe, right? And similarly with athletes, you have to learn this certain amount of stoicism and emotional control to perform. That mental toughness and grit. Both populations have to really push through tough stuff. So this really helps them. I won't go over all of them, like team over self, strong identity, this public accountability. So these values are a really important part of the culture, but what comes with that is this double-edged sword, right? So they help the individual do the really hard things they have to do, but they create a lot of vulnerability too, especially when it comes to healthcare and behavioral healthcare seeking. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training. I look at the world through that lens. So, for example, that stoicism that propels you forward and keeps you going even when times are tough, lets you do the hard things, can create like a significant delay in care seeking because I don't want to seem weak. I don't want to seem less than. Everybody else is fine, so I should be fine too, and I'm just going to push through. So we tend to see folks in that delayed care seeking means like more disease progression. They're worse than we would see them if they had seen us earlier. The same thing, that mental toughness and grit really delays that help seeking. I often talk about with service members this sort of we call it respect for social order. So like there's hierarchies, right? There's a coach, there's a captain, there's players. Same in the military, there's a hierarchy. And that can get in the way of care too, because for me, when I was a captain in the Air Force, I was, and anytime you're in anything medical, you're seen as higher ranking anyway. So when I would talk about an intervention or something with a military member, and I would say, okay, so what do you think of that treatment plan? How does that sound? Do you have any questions? And the response I would get was, no, ma'am, right? Because I am showing deference. Now I could interpret that behavior as they're checked out. They don't care. They're not invested in this treatment that we're doing together. And if I don't interpret their behavior in the context of culture, I'm going to miss stuff big time. And the same thing is true for athletes, right? If we don't take things in the context of their culture and how that has shaped their interactions, we're going to miss opportunities to intervene in a positive way. Then add on top of that, so we've got military culture, and I put athlete culture, very similar, a lot of consistency across that. But the values and ideals and the focus for those two cultures are almost diametrically opposed to behavioral health culture. So, in athletics, it's about the team. In the military, it's about the unit. When I'm working with somebody, it's about them. Like, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve, right? Same thing with pain tolerance or management of pain, like push through. I don't know how many behavioral health providers there are in the room. You can raise your hands if you want. I don't think any of us necessarily went into this for like increased pain tolerance, a little bit, but we want to reduce distress, right? So when things are that diametrically opposed, if we try to pull service members or pull athletes into our culture, into our mental health culture, it's not going to work. Right? It's not going to land. They're not going to stay connected. They're going to say, yes, ma'am, and walk out the door. So one of the things I always really foot stomp when I'm training behavioral health providers is one, you need to have a sense and an understanding of the culture so that you can appreciate and value these things that have been really important to the individual while figuring out where it's getting in their way now. Because it's not that we're never going to use some behavioral health culture stuff. I will say performance psychology has been an adaptation where it's a little more aligned, right? It's a little, the whole point of it. And performance psychology exists in the military, has for a very long time. Obviously, a huge part of athletics as well. And there's this sort of more leaning into the culture, the athlete culture, than the behavioral health culture. So I think that when we think about bridging the gap, you know, we've come a long way in trying to understand these aspects of culture, but we need to remind ourselves, you know, what are the important aspects of culture for this individual in front of me? Culture of origin and athlete culture, you know, and then they've got, that's really complicated. That's like a whole other talk. But appreciating that shapes their behaviors and their thoughts, their initiation of care, their receptivity of care, what kinds of treatments you're offering. So really important to ponder. So again, performance psychology starts the bridge. But I would also maintain that something that we've used in the military for a long time, stress first aid, would be a great addition to working with athletes. So stress first aid really integrates naturally with performance psychology. It's about protecting readiness, normalizing stress, destigmatizing stress. It's all about prevention and early intervention, preventing folks from going from injured to ill, keeping people in the game where possible, and protecting identity when performance is fluctuating. So what the heck is stress first aid? I gave a pre-workshop training, and I showed a slide that is called What's Up with All the First Aid, because we have stress first aid and mental health first aid and psychological first aid, and they're all awesome. They all address different things. So I want to be clear that I'm not denigrating or dismissing these other great interventions that we have. I think there's a place for stress first aid as well. And so that's what we'll talk about. So stress first aid was born out of, actually SAMHSA had made a request to a lot of trauma researchers saying, you know, it's great that we have psychological first aid, which is, you know, kind of used after a big event, like, a hurricane, a disaster, something like that. What about for people who are in high stress occupations all the time? Like, it's never ending, unrelenting stress. What do we know from the literature that addresses that? And that's where these little circles come from. So this group of international experts got together and they looked at the literature, and these were the things that they identified. So a sense of safety, you got to make people feel as safe as possible. You need to look at calming. How do we bring things down? Connection being a huge one. Self-efficacy and hope. These are the things that again and again kind of promoted better management of stress or getting through high stress. So stress first aid was developed to be a framework that is a self-care and peer support model really focused on recovering from stress reactions, better understanding stress reactions, and then doing things to be able to manage stress. It's practical and scalable. We're looking at like tiny steps, little footholds people can take to move them towards wellness, move them towards the green, which we'll talk about in a second. I already said it's peer support, but again, the big thing was this reduced stigma. I will tell you that stress first aid has been rolled out in first responders, military, healthcare, again, like all very high stress, but also like high stigma populations, law enforcement, etc. It's embedded in the culture of the system. So it's not prescriptive. It's not like you need to do these 5 things. It's what in your culture does connect look like? And how can we leverage that? What in your culture does self-efficacy look like? And how do we address that? It's not meant to address all ranges of issues, so we still need to refer to, bridge the gap when we need to, but it's teaching everybody to get a better sense of what's going on around them, what's going on with themselves. Okay. One of my favorite things about stress first aid, and this is now, I understand being used in other places, it was when it was originally developed, the first place it was used was the military, and it was combat operational stress first aid. And the idea was that service members felt like if they were not in this constant ready state, something was wrong. And so the creation of the stress continuum was to reinforce that we all flow in and out of these different levels of stress, right? Or these different zones, if you will. It was the military, so we color coded it because we like to color code things in the military and keep it simple. But it's really, you know, green is ready, yellow is reacting, orange injured, red is ill. You know, ready is you're that best, you're the top of your game. You're ready for anything, you're effective functioning, things like that. Reacting is quite honestly where most of us stay a lot of the time. It's not always a bad thing. It's what kind of gives us that little bit of an edge. We're responding to lots of stressors at home, maybe at work, and we're having some mild and transient distress. I say often in these workshops that we run, orange is the new green. We really, this is kind of where we're comfortable. Where we start to really pay attention and where the stress first aid was developed for is this injured category. So we want to address stress injuries as quickly as possible so that they don't go into that clinical mental health diagnosis. And so when we are talking about stress injuries, we're talking about 4 different kinds. So there's wear and tear, which I've heard a lot of stories since I've been here about wear and tear injuries. It's just that sort of fatigue from the grind. Excuse me, inner conflict, moral injury, folks hear of moral injury. This is when something happens that goes against your morals or principles, or you witness something happening, makes you question a lot of things, can be very distressing. So there's moral injuries, traumatic stress. So if something actually does happen that's traumatic on or off the field. And then loss injuries. Lots of loss injuries talked about, whether that's injury or you lose your spot on a team or you, retire out of the sport. I'm glad we're having a talk on that next. So, and then the ill is really when we're talking about clinical mental disorders, where you would be doing a referral. The idea is let's do some actions to move people towards the green. How do we often say, how do we grow the green? Like, are you constant, and as you know, as teams, how are we as a team going to grow the green? Where are we on this continuum as a team? So real simple examples of how this gets used. Youth soccer team, the coach teaches the continuum, and before a game or before practice says, okay, where are we? If you're green, thumbs up, yellow, middle thumb, orange, thumbs down, and get a sense of where the players are, and then adjust accordingly. Or, you have a whiteboard in the locker room where people can kind of put a magnet on where they are. They don't have to disclose who it is, but, where would you put your magnet? If there's a lot of magnets in the orange and yellow, we need to do something to address that. So many different creative ways you can use that. Okay, so great. Now what do we do? These are the core actions that are a part of Stress First Aid. I'm going to go over them very quickly. Usually in an all-day workshop, we'd spend a lot of time on this, so this is the fast one. And it was, again, developed for the Marine Corps and the Navy. So it's the 7 C's. Do you get it? 7 C's. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So you'll see that cover and calm, connect, competence, and confidence are that safety, calm, connect, self-efficacy, and hope. They add check and coordinate because that's an important part. So check and coordinate are our continuous aid. You're doing them all the time. So we're really reinforcing with our teams. We check on each other and we check on ourselves. We need to be figuring out what's going on. And observe and track and figure out if we need to collaborate and coordinate some sort of care. Cover and calm are next. They're our primary aid. So cover is to create that sense of safety, whether that's psychological safety, physical safety, and how do we restore a sense of calm? When things are upregulated, the frontal lobe goes offline, the amygdala goes online. So how do we flip that around and create a sense of calm so we can think about things clearer? And then we're looking at our secondary aid, connect being, we've heard connect repeatedly. What an important part of that, that is for athletes on the field, off the field, with people not on the field, and so how do we promote connection? And then competence. When we're seeing somebody struggle, Do we need to focus on occupational skills in this, athletic skills in this case, well-being skills or social skills? And then, with the confidence, how do we instill trust and hope? How do we, help to promote those things, make meaning, and increase that self-worth? So the easiest way for me to go through this is I'm going to go through one example because Matt just already gave me the 5-minute warning. Oh, okay, I can have 5 extra. That is not because I'm his wife, okay? Just want you to know that. So we'll go through one of these examples and then I will wrap up. Matt and I went to the Games conference, and Allie went to the Games conference in London, and we had to be international. So first of all, you should know that they do not call it athletics. That only means track and field. So it's sport. So that was something we learned. But I added the unbreakable lock, so we'll do that because it's fun. So, Elliot, did I do something? Elliot is a 29-year-old lock for a Premiership rugby club known for toughness and reliability. Mid-season, he sustains his 3rd concussion in 2 years. While he's sidelined, public speculation intensifies. Teammates joke he's wrapped in bubble wrap, and he becomes increasingly irritable at home. Sleep tanks, focus slips, and he pressures staff to rush clearance because the team needs me. Sound familiar? Maybe some different terms, but familiar. Kind of starts in the yellow zone. He's motivated, but this prolonged uncertainty pushes him into orange. Identity threat and physical limitation trigger classic stress injury signs, some resentment, withdrawal, and frustration in rehab drills. So if we were to apply the stress first aid model to Elliot's situation, these are just some examples of how that might look, and you wouldn't do all of them. You know, as a teammate, as a coach, as an athletic trainer, you'd be thinking, what does Elliot need right now? So check, a locker room teammate notices Elliot avoiding banter and staying withdrawn. Over lunch, he casually asks, how's your head holding up with all this downtime? Opening the door without pressure. Coordinate. The teammate touches base with the captain and physio, so everyone sends the same steady message. Recovery first, no rushing. Cover. Coaches shield him from media speculation, shifting injury questions to the captain. A teammate quietly runs interference when reporters hover. So again, that sense of safety, psychological safety. Calm. Before rehab, Elliot practices 2 minutes of paced breathing with physio to settle agitation and improve focus. Connect. The squad invites him to a low-key pub night, making sure he stays part of the team life. A veteran shares his own concussion journey, normalizing the struggle. Competence. Rehab staff and teammates highlight micro wins, reaction time, balance and influence in walkthrough sessions. A teammate shows him a video of a defensive setups that still rely on his communication style, right? So they're reminding him that, you know, all these skills he's gaining and continues to contribute to the team in that manner. Confidence. After a match, the captain recognizes Elliot for leading sideline organization. Coaches reinforce that his transparency is strengthening locker room culture around long-term health. And the outcome, Elliot re-engages with the team, frustration decreases. By season's end, he co-leads recovery sessions using color check-ins, that, you know, red, yellow, green kind of thing, showing that leadership extends beyond being physically on the pitch. So I got to say pitch and pub in one example. That made me happy. So again, that's just an example. We don't have time to go through all of them, but this is the base under pressure, who a little bit approximates our daughter Ada, who's a cheerleader, and then the overlated all-star we did in the session the other day. So in closing, there was a great qualitative study. It was done with healthcare workers who hospital had initiated stress first aid at the pandemic, during the pandemic, right? Pretty stressful time for healthcare workers. And this was a qualitative study asking their perception of it. What did they value? Things like that. They valued this shared language. It gave them an easy way to communicate, hey, I'm feeling really crispy orange today. And then people could circle up and do something about it. It normalized the experience of stress. We talk about it. We have a code for it. It's a part of our day-to-day. It's not a fault, a failing, or a bad thing. You're going to cycle up and down. I'm going to cycle up and down. It made the employees feel valued, that the hospital took the time to do this and take care of them and put it into the system was huge. And even though it didn't solve everything and the pandemic continued, it at least showed like we care, we understand this culture is a hard one to operate in. It empowered them to manage their well-being and support their peers, became much more aware of signs of stress in themselves and others. The only thing they wished is that they had learned it earlier. Like as part of onboarding, it's always hard. You know, they were like, great, the pandemic happens and now you give it to us. It would have been nice if we had been practicing this all along, right? So get it in earlier. You know, so to be thinking about like how could stress first aid help us on an individual level, you know, with my athletes, my teammates. So these, I'm not going to read all the bullets, but the idea is we really want to prevent that orange to red deterioration. We want to reduce burnout and exits, you know, across organizations and teams. So it's really, again, much more of a prevention model in that regard. So I will leave you with the challenge of thinking about what is one way that stress first aid could support you, your team, your athletes, your organization, and your day-to-day work. So be thinking about, am I going to pull the stress continuum in? Am I going to focus on some of the C's? What can I do? So I will thank you for your time and your energy and your adjectives. I will be out. I do have some handouts out today, and I hope to continue the conversation. Thank you so much. I've been instructed to put the QR code up for the CEs. If you are getting CEs, you may scan this QR code now.
So we have, we're gonna have a morning break in about a half hour. So we're gonna move right into our next presentation. But before we do that, I have to say, I never once said Jenna was my wife, did I? She put that one out the bag. No, you let that out the bag yourself. And if you have questions for Jenna, because she is my wife, we're driving home together, so she'll be here as long as I am. So feel free to find her and ask questions. I'm going to bring, has everybody got the QR code who needs it? I got a couple more. Everybody good? All right. If you need it later, I can pull it back up for you. So Jeff, can we just put down the regular? All right, I'm going to bring Joy back up. So, yeah, are you ready? Oh. It's not this one yet, not this PowerPoint yet, Jeff, just the background. So what we thought would be really interesting this morning is to talk about sort of stress first aid, kind of getting ahead of things. And Joy is actually talking about getting ahead of things in a different manner, but she's going to talk about life after sport. And for some of you, I'm sure, and I'm not going to give everything away, Joy, but you know, the idea about getting jobs after school when you've played sport and maybe you didn't get a job while you're in school, or maybe you couldn't get those internships you thought you needed to have, or maybe there's other things about it. So Joy is going to talk a little bit about her experience as a financial advisor, and doing a lot of things and being a former athlete or current athlete, but, you know, and talk a little bit about what do you do? How do you prepare for life after sport, especially if you feel like what you're doing isn't, but it is. So it is preparing you, but she's going to talk a bit more about that.
Don't worry, we are not talking about financial advising. I promise you that. It's going to be a lot more fun than that. But before we start, I kind of need, can you guys hear me okay? All right. I kind of need to get a feel for the room because I'm going to tailor our conversation and I'm kind of high octane, so I'm going to be running around a little bit. So if you're a current athlete, meaning like in a collegiate athlete, do you mind raising your hand so I know who's, okay, so we got about 3 or 4. Excellent. Good job. Good work. How about coaches? How many coaches do we have in the room? Please hire. Thanks for all you do. Thank you for all you do. Big responsibility. Don't mess it up, right? All right. How about care providers? How many care providers in the room? Okay, so majority there. And parents, there we go. And you could be one of many, right? You could be several categories, so a lot of parents. How many of you guys are parents of young, I'll say adolescent or college age athletes right now? Please raise real high so I could see. So about 15, 20 of you? Okay. Are you guys worried about them? All right, tell me what you're worried about. Give me an example of what you're worried about. Balance? Who said balance? Balance in the back? Great, thank you. Pressure. What kind of pressure? Financial pressure. What else? Identity. What do you mean by identity? We had this conversation. Yeah, I'm just an athlete. Can you believe that? That we would allow our young folks to think I'm just an athlete. What else? Future thinking? Tell me more about that. Critical thinking, maybe. Okay, great. What else? Some confidence. Can you believe that we're talking about athletes having confidence? Isn't that just wild? The rest of the world thinks athletes are like the most confident people on the planet, right? And then they have to go to this real world like I did decades ago. I know I'm not alone in this room on that. And you have to kind of make your own way. So just disclaimer, I'm not a medical professional. I'm just a civilian. Played sports a long time ago, but was able to catapult that into a really great career as a CEO. And I'll just briefly tell you what I do so you understand the context. But I'm the CEO of a financial planning firm. And I'll tell you that some of our most successful financial advisors, and it's really the only time I'll talk about our particular career, happen to be former athletes. Why do you guys think that is? It's not because I'm the CEO, but why do you think that is? Mental fortitude, but a lot of careers could have that, right? Like doctors, etc. Yes? Organized and disciplined, good. What else? They can take feedback usually well. Okay, great. What else? Hand up. Team-oriented, adaptable, Jen? Empathetic, yes. Resilient. Driven. Getting closer. I'm looking for I want to nail one here. Right there. They played under limited income. Very good. They played on potential. Right? It's kind of where we're headed. Yep. They can fake it till they make it. Tell me more about that. Okay, great. So they saw something. If they were freshmen, they saw a senior. I want to be like that. I want to be the captain. I want to perform like that teammate. Okay. Anything else you guys are thinking of? Yeah. The grind. I was thinking about how Molly's one of my teammates. She's an advisor with my firm. She was, by the way, previous CFO of the Western Athletic Conference. Athlete, collegiate athlete, softball player, and an absolute wonderful professional. And we were joking that we were always in the red. we didn't even know there were other colors. We didn't know there was a color. It just felt like in those days you were just in the red. What about something as basic as being on time? What about for the athletes, the coaches, and the parents in the room? What kind of heck did you get or do you get if you're late, if your kid's late to practice? Am I right? What about to a game? What about not having the proper attire? So those are all things that also go into, you think about athletes and what they've developed in terms of skill. All the things you guys just said actually is their resume. So there's a lot of collegiate athletes, and some of you in the room, and coaches who say, Joy, I didn't get to intern. All I did was sport. So say they were a basketball player. It was often, okay, training, okay, off-season weight training, okay, cardio, okay, XYZ. I hope that's accurate with basketball. I try not to talk about soccer too much. So 365 days a year, if you're competitive or on a scholarship or have a potential professional future, you guys know this, you're training all the time. And then what happens? What happens in the life? What did we learn from the doctors? What did we learn about stress? What could happen in the life cycle of a very short life cycle of a young athlete's life? Injury, burnout. So think of, what about the last 5 years? Pandemic. What else? Loss, lose a parent, lose a sibling, lose a teammate. Puberty, or social media. What was the first one? Comparison to social media. The realization that they might not go pro. That's a big one. You know, you'll have guys throw out their arm just trying to make that baseball, that minor team. So all the things we talked about prior to this becomes the athlete's resume. How many of you guys are working with young athletes for their next phase after sport? Raise your hand high. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that. So what you want to do is remember that you're bridging what they've learned as an athlete to their next phase in life. And we want to make their landing a little bit smoother. Matt was saying something like, there's a psychological difference between when an athlete chooses when they're done playing and when it's not their choice that they're done playing. Did I get that right? Wherever he went. So when do we choose when we're done playing? We, as the athletic community, coaches, care providers. Sometimes you don't get to choose. When do we get to choose? Well, sometimes a lot of young female athletes have to leave to take care of their families, or they have to work, especially in minority communities. Playing in college might not be an option, or playing all 4 years in college might not be an option because they might need to support their family with working. It's a choice. So when is it not a choice? Injury. That's a big one. What else? Deselection. Can you be more specific? They don't get chosen to be on a team, which mentally, do you think that impacts our athletes? Absolutely. And so when is the best time to talk to a young athlete about what happens after sport? Is it when deselection happens or when they still have control? It's when they still have control. And around what, I like how the doctor said it's not necessarily an age, but when they pinpoint the sport that they're going to play, around when do we think that is, roughly? About 13, would you say? For all the athletes in the room, you probably played multiple sports. And when you said, I'm going to be a soccer player, I'm going to be a softball player, you were probably in your early teens, right? Or your folks talked to you, or the coaches said, or the opportunities opened up. So I'd like to encourage everybody who's working with young athletes to start talking about life after sport much sooner. Because we've seen, and I can give you a ton of examples, and you could Google them, so I won't give you too many stories, but we've seen how athletes, after they become injured, they are deselected or cut, lose a scholarship, maybe transfer thinking they're going to play and don't play. We see an incredible decline in their mental health. And I can tell you, as someone who interviews people every day, that you can tell an athlete who's self-selected and realized, yep, I played football and now I'm a professional. It could be a professional attorney. It could be a doctor. It could be an architect. But you can tell when somebody chose to become a professional in their next phase in life and when they were deselected out of their sport. You can also tell when they were coached well. So forgive me for the coach. You can also tell when they were coached well. So if I'm anybody in charge of recruiting for a sport here in this room, what sport? What school? Oh, really? Excellent. Anybody else similar to her that does all the recruiting from high school teams? Okay, excellent. Okay, excellent. How many times do you talk to the parents of the recruits about resume building? Right. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, put a pin in that. What percentage of female C-suite executives played college sports? It could change depending on the study, but it's over a certain number and all. 94%. Very good. Very good. Over 94% of women who are in C-suite played college sports, were athletes, identify as former athletes, right? How many, and this isn't to pick on your school, it's actually, this is great that you're here. How many professional female athletes that are now C-suite, CEO, COO, CFO, CDO, how many of those come and speak to the female athletes at your school? Would that be valuable to your athletes? How about this? Would it be valuable to your recruiting? It'd be valuable to your recruiting, wouldn't it? Right? So you're shaking your heads. You guys are athletes? Where? Long Beach. I'm from California, from Los Angeles. Excellent. What's your sport? Soccer? Excellent. I went to UC-Irvine. Were you here when we said that? Okay. That's what's up. Yeah. Where in Long Beach? Case manager. Excellent. How many times does Long Beach bring in for your women's soccer team a C-suite executive who was a former athlete? What year are you? You're a sophomore. Would they be open to that? Would they be open to doing that, do you think? Do you feel, who said confident about 10 minutes ago? Would you have the confidence to bring that up to one of your assistant coaches? What's your name? McKenna. If you do that and you let me know you do that, I got something for you. Okay? All right. McKenna from Long Beach. You guys heard it here first. And males too, by the way. But I think that in light of the panel this morning, and I know we're having a male panel soon, right after me, I think, how valuable would that be, parents in the room, for your athletes to see other people who are just like them now running companies? Would that be valuable? All right. So what we find is that a lot of young athletes are saying, Joy and et cetera, I don't have much of a resume because I had to play sport. We talked about this, right? So all of the descriptions that we just talked about actually become their resume. If you have a young person in your life, here's what I'd like you to do. Have them draft a resume. They might be 13, 14 years old. It doesn't matter. What you're doing is you're instilling all of that discipline, teamwork, hard work, accountability, leadership. You're reminding them that everything they're doing and sacrificing sometimes in a social life matters for their future. And you're reminding them that all the things that they're able to develop as a young professional student or as a young student is going to matter no matter what. Because we're seeing injuries a little bit earlier. We're seeing injuries, maybe they're 18, 19, not necessarily 21, 22, right? Care providers, you're seeing them a little bit earlier. And so what happens to that athlete when they walk through my office door and they're lost if they don't know how valuable their training has been as an athlete. You could see it in their eyes. And they're living in 3 years ago when they were the star baseball player, the star volleyball player. Versus you have somebody like, and I'll use Molly, come in, and we're older, and we still remember our best days on the field, don't you? And what's great about professionals that were athletes is they like to keep score. We love to keep score. Let me tell you, Molly keeps score. If there's something off, Molly will let me know, and she keeps score. How do I do this? How do I ring this bell? What do I get if I do this? So athletes become so employable provided that their mental state is strong. Because there's a very, very clear pendulum the other way as an employer. It's, I was supposed to play pro, but I didn't. Well, who was coaching you to tell you that the odds of you playing pro are just, I mean, you know, from a lot of us, that wasn't an option. It just was, there was no league. But how many of these young athletes are thinking that they're going to go play, you know, for the Dodgers, or they're going to go play football, or they're going to be the kicker for, you know, the Packers or whatever? And frankly, it's not the injury usually that gets them. What do you guys think it is? One of our athletes, the case manager, said it before. It's deselection. Here you have less than 2% of high school athletes will ever play Division I sports. Less than 2%. They're the best of the best, elite. And they can immediately go from feeling incredibly confident with all of the talent and the skill and the discipline that they've developed, and feel like unworthy and invaluable. And a lot of that is something that we can control as parents, as athletes, as coaches, and reminding them that everything that they've worked on becomes their resume. And so what I'd like to see, for anyone in this room that has any questions, I'm happy to share with you like what kind of interview process somebody might go through in any profession. But I'll tell you, it starts with the way they walk through the door, the eye contact that they make, the confidence that you can teach an athlete anything because they've been disciplined, they've shown up, they understood plays, they've had to memorize, they've had to lead, they've had to be healthy. An athlete can do anything. It's very hard by the time they get to me if they're already defeated. And they're 22 years old. Or 25 years old if they're already defeated. So if you have any questions about how to build a resume, I'm happy to share that with you guys. If you have any questions about how to get somebody in your community, wherever you're from, like a female or a male previous athlete who's now running a company, to come speak to the collegiate athletes, I can help you guys with that. It's very easy. I don't know any athlete that is would not carve out time from their schedule for such an important reason. And so if you have athletic directors, anybody that you guys are working, even in high school, by the way, even in high school, if you have anybody that you're working with from the administrative side that's open to that feedback, like McKenna's going to go talk to the Long Beach coach and probably an athletic director, my ask for you guys and for the future of collegiate athletes who are moving out of college and moving into the professional world is that you guys kind of be that squeaky wheel to make sure that they see that there's life after sport. Okay? And so I'm not going to take any questions unless you want me to, Matt, but I wanted to just kind of thank you and your group. And I just wanted to thank you guys for attending today. This was a very interesting panel for me to host earlier with the doctors and with Jen and with Sierra. And we just wanted to kind of give you guys a glimpse outside of the medical profession, outside of just the coaching profession and being an athlete, what life looks like outside when you start making your own career. And so I'm all done for you. I know that everyone's been in here without a break, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you, guys. We'll see you around. Yep. Thanks. Yeah. You taking a break?
Yeah, we're taking a break. Thank you, Joy. So we are going to take a morning break. So we have until come back a few minutes before 10:30, if you will. We will then talk about our next topic will be, well, we have a special topic for male athletes. So it's actually going to focus on eating disorders and male athletes. So come back if you can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Wait. Can everybody hear me? Is that any better? Okay. Come back a few minutes before 10:30, please. We'll get started on our next panel. It's going to be male athletes and eating disorders. So a few minutes before 10:30, please. All right, we're going to can everybody hear me now? I got to find somebody that I know. Capri, can you hear me? You got me? You can hear me? All right. We're going to get started on our next panel. I'm going to introduce Ross Barr in a second. I just did. Ross will reintroduce himself. But before we get started, this is a little bit of an inside joke up here, but it's not that inside. Raise your hand if you're super happy about the amazing Seattle Seahawks winning the Super Bowl. That's all we need to know. That's it, right? We have some Seahawks, and we have a little bit of a Boston issue up on the panel. We put the Boston guys next to each other in case they needed to cuddle during this, because make sure that everything is okay with them. So, and yes, the Broncos are in there somewhere, but yes, the Seahawks won again, and Pete Carroll did not pass the ball. When you have Marshawn Lynch, it makes no sense. Here you go.
Can everybody hear me? Love it. So I'm Ross Barr. I'm the director of student athlete mental health and performance at Colorado State University. I've been there for 3 years. And I'm really excited about this panel. One of the things that I've noticed in my work that gets to be really difficult is getting access to male athletes. There tends to be a massive stigma in terms of them being able to come in and want to talk. I am a huge statistics person. If you were here last year for the panel that I sat on, I'm not going to go that way this year, but I will weave it in every once in a while because I love data. What I want from this panel is to hear from the perspectives of current male athletes and former male athletes on a really important topic, and that's eating disorders in male athletes. This is something that gets put pretty significantly in the shadows, I think, in general, but especially when we start to talk about a population that sees a lot of stigma when it comes to mental health. This is something that we really want to bring to light. For my panelists, I'll give you a moment to introduce yourselves here in a second. But what I want you to know is, like, everybody here is here to learn from you. We want your perspectives. We want your stories. We also want you to feel safe in doing that, right? So feel free to share as much or as little as you would like to. I'll hand it over to Taylor, and I'll just let you guys go down the line and introduce yourselves, give a little bit of background about your experience in sport and what it might mean to you sitting on the panel today.
So I'm Taylor Smith. I am the mental performance coach at the Athlete Edge program, which is an eating disorder treatment center here in Denver that's specifically for athletes. We're only one of 2 in the entire country that have a eating disorder full robust program that caters to the athlete identity and kind of like the whole return to sport or retirement from sport. Prior to that, I was a college swimmer. I was also a recreational swim coach, and while I do not relate directly with eating disorders, it's obviously become like a big part of my life, not just through my career, but also like I knew teammates with it, or teammates who, like, kind of looking back, they may have struggled with it, but definitely not something that was necessarily talked about. And like in my day-to-day work, even though we do see a good amount of male athletes, something that they is still maybe not necessarily talked enough about, because there's definitely more out there that we are not seeing come through our doors that probably might need to come through our doors.
My name is Patrick Devenny, and went to the University of Colorado as a quarterback, got switched to tight end, and that brought a whole lot of get bigger, stronger, faster, leaner tomorrow. Fell into the big clean eating episode and all the fad diets. And then afterwards it's a whole long story, but major loss of identity once football was done. Had a chance to go to the Seattle Seahawks, and simultaneously my 3 best friends all went to the New York Jets, played there. One signed a $60 million signing bonus, and I'm a host in a restaurant. So what was clean eating then turns into a massive eating disorder and depression and near suicide, and was kind of saved by a random podcast. And by the grace of God, didn't go any further with that. And kind of to the Ross's point of, at the time back in like 2016, 17, I was just wanted to talk about it because I looked around and it's really easy to find everything not to do. You could find the new bro science dude on Instagram that's selling his fitness program, but you can't really find anybody to relate to, and couldn't agree more. I think if you want to experience at least disordered eating, stand by the dumbbell rack at 24-hour fitness and take about 3 minutes. But unfortunately, most males have no idea. So it's not even a lack of, not wanting to talk about it. They just have no clue. And so I look back on my career and I'm like, 80% of the guys probably have disordered eating in a sport like football. But again, I spend most of my time trying to educate on what the hell I was actually going through. So that's my passion project on it, and tend to just be more the story along the way.
I'm Charlie Faldy. I'm a senior lacrosse player at Colorado College. Youngest one here with the shortest bio by far. And a big thing for me has been dealing with weight and recruitment, and having coaches tell me that they will not recruit me because I didn't weigh enough or I wasn't strong enough. I've had coaches tell me that, if I put on 30 pounds, I could be on the team, but I've been trying all my life to put on 30 pounds and have never been able to do so. And have dealt with not feeling like I'm big enough or strong enough to play a physical sport, when so much of it is beyond the numbers, and no one cared to ask what I really cared about and who I really was beyond just my height and weight.
My name is Daniel O'Connor, and I was part of the 2008 Olympic team for boxing. I've been a professional boxer for more than a decade. And I've had some sort of an eating disorder for 20 years, to the point where it almost took my life a couple of times. In 2018, I was going to fight for the world championship belt, the WBC, which is the green one. And an hour before weigh-in, the paramedics took me out of my hotel room because I almost killed myself. So my biggest thing is awareness. I mean, I'm a weight class athlete, and I started that when I was 11 years old. So I've been in a weight class sport. I'm 40 now. And the last time I fought was in 2023. And I was at the same weight class when I started in 2005 and when I ended in 23. So for me, it's about awareness. When I first stepped on a scale when I was a child, I didn't know what an eating disorder was or what it could do or where my life was about to go for the next 20 years. I had no idea. I just did what I thought I had to do to make a weight class and compete at my sport and chase a dream and do it at the highest level. So awareness is a big thing for me, and severity. I had no idea how serious this was until I was already in it and it was too late. So I missed a lot of that early intervention and how secretive it was, right? There's a lot of isolation. I did a lot of stuff because you got to understand, I had an eating disorder and I was in a weight class. You can definitely compete in a weight class without an eating disorder. But because I had both, they went in friction with each other for my whole career. So I'm happy to be up here. I'm happy to spread some awareness and kind of share my story and hope that it helps somebody else.
Great. Thank you, guys. We're going to jump straight into the deep end. And for those stats people out there, here's one for you. About 1 in 5 male college athletes last October acknowledged that the pressure to perform negatively impacted their mental health. 1 in 5. I think back to like being a kid in the driveway and making the last shot of a game by myself and like building all these different types of pressures. But there's pressures that start to come along throughout the career that I don't even think we really realize were there the entire time, right? We look up to people and how they might look as an athlete, and we have that image that starts to get into our heads. What is, when you look back, or Charlie, even now, what's one lie that you might have heard about how your body should look as a male athlete, or one lie you might have told yourself?
I think what I maybe experienced a little bit in my own career, but I definitely what I see with like, especially the male athletes that I work with now in the treatment center is that there's only like one type of body for any like specific sports. And maybe for like sports that have multiple positions on it, it's like when you're a tight end, you gotta be a specific body compared to like when you're a quarterback. And so like that's kind of where like that disordered eating or that like disordered relationship with exercise and movement can come into place of like I'm trying to fit this build. This is the only way I can actually be this competitive athlete. This is the only way I'm going to make it onto the team and get coaches' attention. And so the lie is there's not just, I guess the truth is there's not just one type of body that can play sports. There's not one type of body that can play football or lacrosse or boxing or swimming. Yeah.
To piggyback off that, I wish performance enhancing drugs were more acknowledged. Not necessarily, I'm not saying that they're sure frowned upon it or whatever, but putting somebody on the pedestal in my own mind of guys that I played with or that were right before me and realizing how prevalent it is in the NFL, whether it's HGH or, I think a lot of athletes have moved away from just general steroid use, but they know how bad it is. But when I look up to somebody, and especially if you're a high schooler, and there was a guy that I played with right around the same time, went to USC, then he was like the Goliath of all Goliaths. Everyone looked at him, was like, that's the body image you need. He ends up going first round. Then he tests positive like 3 or 4 times and ends up getting suspended a bunch and blah, blah, blah. And he was a phenomenal athlete. But it created this perception in my head of what I was supposed to look like without the reality of like, unless I'm going to put a needle in me and can afford it, it's not going to be possible. So the amount of pressure that we put on ourselves to live up to these gold medalists, these athletes, NFL guys, there needs to be that caveat that's like, okay, here's where you're at. But I also don't fault it. I always say too, I would have been on HH in a heartbeat had I been able to afford it, when I know that if I can cut my 40 down 0.3 of a second, that's millions of dollars that you're talking about. So yeah, it's a different story, but I think that lie of just you look around, you're like, oh, I'm competing against him. Well, you're actually competing against him plus all this other injectable substances along the way.
Yeah, I think playing a contact sport and a physical sport like lacrosse, football, or boxing, the idea that you need to be a big, strong guy to be tough and to be able to withstand like punishment, as is often said in lacrosse, I think is just completely wrong. And you could be the biggest, strongest guy, but it doesn't matter if you're not as tough as you want to be. And I think that often people look at someone who is fairly skinny and doesn't have all that muscle and think that, he can't hold up or they can't hold up in a physical environment because they're just going to break. And I think it's so much more is about who you are and how strong you're willing to be inside rather than, what you look like without a shirt on. That's what real toughness comes from. And it's not about how much you can bench press, but how much, you're willing to sacrifice for people around you, and especially with a team sport, how much you're willing to sacrifice for people on your team and for yourself.
This one's a little bit of a loaded question for me because I am in a weight class sport, so it's not like we're underneath equipment or jerseys. I weigh in naked because the 3 ounces that my underwear does make a difference because I'm cutting so much weight. So it's kind of a false sense of, okay, the better they look, the more prepared they are for the fight, because your body is going to change in an 8-week training camp and you're going to be optimal. So you kind of get this delusion that, all right, the better that they look, the more prepared they are for the competition the next night after weigh-in. But the problem with that is I gave myself this false delusion that I should always look what I look like when I'm weighing in, which is crazy because the tactics I was using to make that weight were unhealthy and put my life at risk. So I kind of got into this mindset that like I should always look how I look when I weigh in, right? And then the further I got away from that, the more it affected my mental health because now I didn't think I was prepared. I didn't think I was what I needed to be to now compete. And that caused more unhealthy negative actions and behaviors, which brought me further away from that image that I kind of had cemented in my mind. So it played a lot of different roles for me as a combat athlete, my body and the way you can manipulate it for a competition.
You know, to get to a high level of competition, it takes a lot of discipline. Grit is a term that gets thrown around a lot as well. A lot of times that's something that's really valued, especially in male culture and male sport culture. I'm curious, from your perceptions, when does grit go from being that virtue that helps drive you to becoming a cage that holds you back, might put you more in isolation? Danny, you and I had a good conversation about that at one point.
Again, so I'm in a weight regulated sport as my career and my profession. So for me, I mean, as an elite athlete, my discipline was 100% in everything. If I had to be up at 4 a.m. to run, I was up at 3:30. If I had to eat at 9 o'clock every day on the dot, I was eating at 9 o'clock. Every aspect of my life was squared away in a discipline that a lot of people couldn't understand. And I used it to perfect my sport and to chase success. And the thing that really shifted was when that discipline changed. And now, because of the eating disorder, because of the weight tactics I was using, that at one time I had so much control over, now I had no control over. And even though my mind and body were telling me to do one thing and I wasn't listening, there was a disconnect. That's when I knew that there was something seriously wrong. And because now it looks like I have no discipline. To everybody in my sport, to everybody that knows me, it looks like I have no discipline whatsoever. And when I really look back at it, it's not that I lost discipline. It's just my discipline shifted from extreme in one way to the totally opposite way. And that opposite way was just going against everything I was doing in my sport. And I remember when that happened, you know, I just remember feeling like I was losing my mind. What's going on with me? I'm trying to do this thing, but I can't. I can only do this thing and I can't stop. I don't know what's going on with me. So that was definitely a shift back in 2013. I can remember it like it was yesterday, kind of coming out of delusion and being like, all right, well, you know, yeah, you've done a lot of unhealthy tactics and you've done a lot of certain habits for years and years and years, but now they're uncontrolled. Now they're on a different level. Now I can't do something to change them in the moment. So we got a real problem here. And I just wish I had kind of seen that a little bit earlier and maybe have made some changes earlier before the delusion came away and it was already a little bit too late.
Sorry to make you feel old, but I was 10 in 2013. Going back to your idea of grit, I think there's this belief that sports and life are not the same. That, you know, once you step on a field or in a ring, that nothing else matters. And I think as especially male athletes, not enough people say, you know, I'm not okay. And there's stuff in my life that's impacting what I'm doing on the field in my sport. And that idea of grit, of I'm just going to tough it out and I'm not going to talk to anyone because, you know, it's not something that you see strong male athletes do. I think is something that it completely harms athletes, and that grit of trying to do it on your own when there's people around you that want to help you and that want to be there for you. But a sense of ego and not letting that because you think you're, you know, a tough, strong person that can handle anything on their own.
I think you're also afraid of losing playing time too, right? There's that difference of current athletes, and then it's easy for me to go back to CU now and bang on all my experience, but I'm not afraid of losing playing time. I also think with grit and determination and all that, without a doubt, it's great, but it's also very easy to hide in that and let it become your identity. So I feel the exact same way that you start to like want to. I always said, if I'm not going to be in the NFL, I need to look like I'm in the NFL. And the only satisfaction I could get at that point in life, because I was so depressed, was every single person applauding me for my work ethic, for what I was doing in the gym, and had no idea I was going through an absolute mental hell, and every day sucked. But in that weird dichotomy of now I'm getting applauded though. So it's like that is where my identity came. So I started to just actually live within those confines of the grit and the determination. Then to the same point, I lost it all. And I was like, what the hell is happening? I can't, I have no grit or determination anymore, no discipline. But I think once it stops serving the bigger purpose of what you're trying to achieve and it starts to then negatively affect you, that's where things can get really speed wobbly and escalate from there.
Yeah. I think that's definitely something that we see often, but also like I've seen that with like just my own experience. I remember senior year of college, like swimming is like like September through like early March sport. It was so maybe like, I think it was like right before Christmas break, we had like a big invite. They were heading down to like, Kentucky that was hosting it. And it was maybe like 2 days before he left. And like after warm up, I just like, I can't even recall why, but I remember just like getting out of the pool, like storming off to the locker room and just like leaving without talking to like anyone. And I think that's where it kind of came down, like for so long out of 15-year swimming career. It was something that like it became my identity, and like having that grit, that discipline, that determination of like who I need to be kind of like was just like compiling on it. And like now, like through my work, I see it every single day where it's like just gets to the point where like you're seeing that extreme determination turn into a unfortunate like consequence, because you could become more burnt out. I think one of the biggest things I see is like that loss of enjoyment, showing up to practice, showing up to competition, everything. It becomes a chore. It's become something that we dread to do, that we just kind of like maybe at some point break down. And it's really something that, besides that one showing I had in that one practice, would have to like do in private. And it's just like it eats at you. And it really takes away like your idea of like what you can do. I think I have like one athlete right now who has, due to their eating disorder, been removed from their sport for over a year now. They're on even though they're, like still an adolescent, I would say, they were on like a career track, and basically they're like, now what do I do with my life? Like I was expected to be doing this thing for the rest of my life. It was like I was already kind of like traveling around the country, like getting recruited, getting looked at, and now what do I do? And so like that's where like that determination, that discipline to be this person, to have your entire life planned out, kind of just unfortunately be like thrown away because you were so disciplined within the eating disorder. Because the eating disorder really teaches individuals how to be disciplined, and it can just totally warp the motivation.
I was surprised by this statistic. About 1 in 2 men, college men, are willing to seek psychological support. I was shocked. I thought that number would be far lower. The couple things that really kind of caught my eye: 1 in 4 would feel inadequate seeking support. 1 in 5 would feel less intelligent seeking support. And that kind of goes, a couple of you touched on that. I'm curious, as you go through a team, and Danny, even a little bit just in the boxing community too, what kinds of comments are made in the locker room by coaches, by teammates, by friends that trigger some of the eating disorder components, might send you down a path to again, stay silent?
There's a lot of words that are said in the locker room that I'll stay away from, but I actually think it might even be more on the opposite side. Like you're in that environment all day long. If I'm in an environment where you're not bullshitting with somebody and I'm like, God, I don't know, I'm out of my wheelhouse here. But for me, it was more the accolades I wasn't receiving. When somebody did get that accolade that I was trying to achieve so hard for, all that. Sure, there were times, somebody, it makes me think of Arnold Schwarzenegger in Pumping Iron, that documentary, and he was like a magician at getting under somebody's skin by the certain things he would say when they're about to step on stage, of like, it was like a backhanded compliment, and it would totally derail Frankie or whoever it was he's going against. But you have that, and those definitely can get underneath you, of just like, I thought you'd be bigger by now, or whatever it's going to be. Those things are going to kind of stab you. But it was also just a lot of that comparison game, day in and day out, of, you're all trying to achieve the same thing, but everyone is going to be like, all right, see ya. And they're going to go to the gym and do an extra rep or an extra set. But I think, especially though, if it does come from like a strength coach or some position coach, that's where more is on the line, that really anything they say, you're going to take to heart. So it's kind of that weird balance between both those.
Yeah, I can say like in the swimming community, it was maybe a little bit more supportive in some terms, but I think like what came down to it, at least in like my own experience, like with the own teams I was on, like high school, like I had a West Point grad as my coach. And like, if you had a bad day, like clearly something was wrong with you and you're not trying hard enough. And so it was like, I'm not trying hard enough, I guess. I'm having a bad day. I can't have excuses. A college coach was a bit more like empathetic and everything, but it still like didn't come down to like the environment where it's like you could be like, I want to reach out and everything. I think one of the issues, at least with my own experience, is that like I went to like a smaller school. Like we didn't really have a good counseling program at all, let alone an athlete specific one. So like I know like the idea and thought when like it was myself or someone else struggling, like while we may have been like supportive of people, like it was kind of like we would talk amongst ourselves, because like the person in the counseling center across campus isn't going to understand anything of what it's like to be like a swimmer and the expectations that we've put on ourselves. But kind of going to like more to like the locker room, weight room talk. Speaking of like one athlete I worked with, this is like a high level college football player was actually like, I don't think their team knew what we did and got sent to us. And when he was with us and he was talking about like some of the barriers that he's had, their team had, anyone know what FYF stands for? All right. Excuse my language. Stands for fuck your feelings. They had FYF posters in the weight room. Really welcoming environment to talk about your thoughts. And so that is something that I think a lot of male athletes are dealing with. If it's not plastered on the wall, the message is maybe being shared quite often.
Really quick on to that point, one of my favorite things to do is to go to college campuses and talk, especially the athletic departments. My least favorite thing, though, is talking to the coaches. And you have the department who's there that wants to revolutionize mental health. Game over. They're all bought in, right, asking a million questions. You could tell the coaches are, because they sit in the back on their phone, could care less. They want out. And yet I have to realize that across all campuses, especially when you're at elite levels, I'm not meeting coaches at zero, educating on mental health and eating disorders. I'm meeting them at negative 9,000 because they've all done the same shit. And now I'm personally attacking them and their lifestyle and the way that they succeeded, what they did to get to that level. So a lot of times they don't want to hear it, not because they're not interested, but it's poking the bear a little bit. So that's where you see that difference though too, of like schools are on great programs, but then still in the locker room, it's like, well, that's all I know. Let's just get it done. Like it doesn't matter. So it's an interesting environment.
Yeah, I think going back to your stat, I think it's changing for the better. The fact that 1 in 2 college male athletes would seek help, but I think there still is small things that happen. In the weight room as analytics have become such a big part of we'll take weight every week, and the comment of how have you not gained or lost weight, are you trying to do this, are you working hard, and that feeling of you're letting people down because you're not able to either get bigger or lose fat, and I think it's just so false of I'm personally trying as hard as I can to get bigger or, get stronger. And it's not a lack of trying. It's just kind of, how I am. And the insinuation that it's a lack of effort or a lack of caring for myself and my teammates, especially as you go back to like strength coaches who are traditionally, these big meathead guys, don't get why, if you're eating right, you're working out every day, why, it's not translating to you putting on weight. And I think that's just a huge, I don't want to say slight, but this idea that I don't care about my teammates or my team or winning because I'm not putting in effort, when realistically, I'm trying everything I can, but some things just don't work out the way that you would hope.
For me, there's always talk about weight. I mean, I'm in a weight class sport. You're either in your weight, over your weight, under your weight. So there's always going to be talk about weight. And I shut it down right away. Like, yeah, it'll affect me, and it'll affect me more than the conversation, and you won't know that. But right away, as soon as it comes up, I shut it down because I view it as a direct liability. If there's any preconceived notion that I'm not going to be able to make my weight class and compete, that's a problem. So I'll shut it down right away. But the big reality is I had these crazy weight fluctuations. They were shifts that you couldn't believe, from low to high. And so if you saw me in the ring for 30 minutes, you would think I'm a certain way. And then you'd see me 2 weeks after the fight and you would make a comment because I don't look the same. And I could only take so many comments. So in between fights, I just stopped seeing people because I would manipulate and change so much that when I went down, they would question it because obviously I didn't look healthy. And then when it went up, they would make comments because it's not normal. It's not normal occurrence. And I had a lot of things going, like I didn't eat what you ate. And sometimes I didn't eat at the table. So whenever you don't do something that's in the norm of other people, people comment on it, right? So there was times when I didn't eat out. There was times when I could eat nothing unless I cooked it myself. There was times when I would eat with you, but I would have to eat my own food. And I was a first responder for a long time. So food culture is, different. And so there was always comments about how I was eating, what I was eating, when I was eating, what I wasn't eating, what my body looked like, how it changed. And they all affected me because when it was in one place, I didn't want it there. I wanted it somewhere else. So when you commented on me, I took it personal. And the same thing when it went the other way. I didn't necessarily want to be there. I just didn't know how to get away from it at that moment. And when you're commenting on it, it bothered me. So I think I had to grow a pretty thick skin over the years to try to not let that stuff spiral. Because me and you could have been having a conversation and you said one thing and to you it's nothing, you go about your day. But it could have affected me for 5 days because now I got to go back to the gym, back to the scale, back to what I'm doing. And I'm still thinking like, oh man, my jawline's a little bit different. Does that mean I did something too much last night? And oh man, because I knew exactly what my body looked at every stage in the weight cutting process. And if it wasn't matched, something was off. And so I isolated a lot. I better just not talk about it and not hear it and not hang out with you than have to deal with it secretly up here for however long we're hanging out. So that's what I did. In between fights, I just stopped being seen. This physical body, I only let you see it when I feel comfortable with you seeing it. And for a long time, I just wasn't comfortable.
Charlie, you made a good point. Things are shifting, right? And we are starting to get to a point where men are talking more. Still, a little less than half of men are willing to talk to coaches about mental health issues. If you had, not that everybody has this, but I think a lot of us do, if you had a close teammate that you trusted or somebody on staff that you really trusted, and they noticed something at your lowest point, what do you wish they would have said?
Yeah, I think going first of why most people don't talk to their coaches. I think it's something that you brought up of playing time, of you don't want to appear weak. You don't want to appear like you're not okay because they're not going to play you if you don't they don't think that you're doing great. But the second part of what I'd like to hear, I think it's just that feeling that you're not alone, of just, I see you, and I don't even think it has to be words, but I think small acts of, whether it's a pat on the back, whether it's a hug, just, something small, just to know that you're not alone. And even if you're hiding it, you're hiding that you're not well, that someone can see it and cares about you, and cares that that you get better, that they will take time out of their day, out of what they're doing, to help you. And I think that most people don't want to ask for that, because they don't want to be a burden to someone, especially when they're not doing well. They don't want to make someone else worse. So the small act of going out of their way, of just saying, I see you, I'm here for you, just anything like that, however small you think it may be for that person, and it can be life-changing.
I couldn't agree more with. I think it comes down to those, you hear people say it all the time, but like, somebody's going through something, don't say, let me know if you need anything. Like, just do it. And being on the receiving end of that, around teammates and people that I trusted. If I don't really trust you, I don't know you, I don't really want to open up to you. But to just have somebody just show up, they don't even have to say shit. They could just literally sit next to you and they can read it on your face. It's not brain science, but to just sit there and acknowledge, like, dude, you're not alone. That's it. Straight up. It doesn't need to be overly complicated or too emotional, especially if you're dealing with guys and it's, needs to be this huge. Of course, I want to cry about it. I want to let it all out, but it doesn't need to be this like crazy environment, anything. It just knowing you're good. Somebody's there by your side. You're not alone walking through it. So just having that human connection on a real level, but it also the art potentially too. Like, for me, I'm going to need you to come in, like, it's locker room talk as well. Like, I make fun of me somehow, but at the same time, like, have that interaction to where I know it's good. I don't want it to be super strict, confined, politically correct, all the above. It needs to be that natural environment, because that's where I will want to open up and want to give you a little bit of that glimpse, because I also know that how much of the stuff that I went through, if I would have just said it out loud, and especially said it to somebody, the weight of the world drops off. But instead, you're living in this isolation and you're your own worst enemy. So just having somebody show up and just doing it, not putting it back on me. I'm already struggling with enough shit. I don't want to have to turn around and ask for help. That's now I'm screwed. So just taking that initiative.
Yeah, I would piggyback off that. It's definitely like the small day-to-day actions, because kind of like I said earlier, how like we maybe had a small little support group amongst our team that we would like meet up, talk, just like hang out, like random weekdays, just like meet up in someone's like dorm room, and like it wasn't like actual like doing a process group and talking about like our own stuff. Like we all knew we were going through stuff. Like I didn't even know what I was going through until like years later, when they're like, I finally saw a therapist and like, oh yeah, by the way, you're really depressed. And I was like, really? But like, it's it's those day-to-day small actions. I think if like some of me and my teammates, so we didn't actually like kind of like make the space to just like hang out and like not have it be a sport related thing, not have it to be a food related thing, not have it to be like an activity related thing, to just like talk. I had a teammate who, there's train tracks near our school. They memorized the train schedule. And knew exactly when it passed through town, like late at night. And I think if like we didn't have that small little hangout like a couple times a week and week after week, they would not have been willing to get in my car to drive them to go get help. I think they would have really wandered down to that train track and actually done something. And so it's really like it's the small actions and everything. And I think like speaking to like more of like that a little bit of the coach perspective of it, like kind of like as others already said, like we don't really trust the coach if they're not really doing the same day-to-day small actions to like feel safe, feel heard. Like a big thing like I see in my line of work with all the athletes I work with, especially the male athletes, is there's that threat of getting cut, that threat of loss of play time. There's also, it's like, it's not the culture of the team. Like the coach sets the culture of the team. And if like the coach maybe out of the blue is like, hey, like I'm noticing something going wrong, like with little Billy over here and everything, like I want to check in, like he's going to be like, why do you want to talk to me, coach? And like, you know, like freeze up, put on a face in that office and be like, I'm totally fine. Don't worry. I'm good. So like it comes down to like the culture that the coach sets and that like welcoming, supportive environment, seeing the athlete as more than an athlete, that they are going to have potential for additional concerns and problems, especially like the mental health concerns and problems.
Nobody in this world has any idea what I went through except for my wife, Diane, who was by my side for 15 years. And the thing that I think that I really needed, I just needed a guy. First of all, I needed a man because I've met a ton of females in the space who have been amazing. But when it first happened, I needed a guy to be like, listen, yeah, eating disorders are real. I have one. Also, it affects me like this. It was so chaotic, and I had no idea what was going on with myself, that I felt like I needed that because I felt like I was on an island and I felt like my mind was broken, my body was broken. And it was so new because, like I said before, I always had that ability to be disciplined and achieve high things. And all of a sudden it just wasn't. So it was such a mind bend for me. I just felt like I needed that guy where I could speak openly and very real about the things I was dealing with, because the things I was doing, not just to make weight, but with the eating disorder, were so wild, I couldn't fathom how they were even happening, right? And I needed someone else to be like, yeah, you know, this is real. Like, this is what's happening to me. Let me show you. And I didn't really have that. I kind of had to find it in other ways and different things that were similar, but not really. And, you know, I just wish that early on I had that. Period.
I think I want to like piggyback off that, like a bit of that representation again, as someone who's like working in this field and, you know, like spends 40 some hours a week in a treatment center. Having like more men could definitely be helpful. Like I'm not trying to stereotype all of you in the crowd right now, but I'm looking at like one clump of tables of maybe like 4 or 5 tables right now. And I see one guy at those 4 or 5 tables. At the treatment center I work at, I am the only male employee who's like part of like the patient treatment team when it comes to like the dietitians, the therapist, and the mental performance coach. It's just me. Our strength and conditioning coach guy, we have several male staff who make up like the floor staff and everything, as well as like, you know, like some of the behind the scenes, like accountants and everything. But like for what the patients are seeing on the day to day, the representation's not always there. And like for my current caseload, I'm getting a new one next week. I'll have 12 patients. 3 of them are going to be 25% of those are guys, and they're not necessarily seeing that representation.
We have just a couple minutes left, and I want a big theme that kind of comes out of this conference is how do we change? How do we move the future in a different direction? I know I had some questions just kind of for each of you individually, but I want to open it up a little bit. What needs to change, whether it's how we approach weight classes in sport or from a collegiate landscape, how does the conversation need to be different? What should we do different in terms of, you know, mass in football? What do we need to do different from a body composition talk and swim? What change needs to happen in just a few words?
How do you override and undo an entire culture? Like, I think from what everyone's shared up here, it's like, it's ingrained. I would agree with Patrick. Like sometimes talking to the coaches, like my coworkers and I sometimes go out, we talk with teams and everything, and or it's like colleges that bring us in, and it's the coaches who are in the back row. And as I just said, coaches set the tone of the culture. And so like if you can't get to the coaches, you're maybe not going to make the biggest impact that you hope to do.
It's a big task, and especially this day and age with NIL money and all the notoriety and everything that's wrapped up into it. It's a much different game than when I played. But I think a couple things that come to mind is just trying to, especially when it comes to males, normalizing the conversation and making it understandable and relatable for male athletes. The biggest fear is always going to be losing playing time. They're there, they're trying to achieve their dream. But also, unlike females, we don't have like reds. I don't lose my menstrual cycle. I like all of a sudden when we start talking super scientific theory on eating disorder, I'm like, what the hell is happening? You tell me low testosterone. Wait, what? Like, tell me more. What are we talking about? You tell me I have an eating disorder, I'm gonna tell you to pound sand. But if I could start to understand some of those, like what's happening that I know I'm struggling with, that then I'm now going to become curious. I think you also have, you just type in eating disorders on Google, go to image, it's going to be all white women and you're not, it's all pink and all this shit. And I have zero desire to go in there. And unfortunately, eating disorders is ED, right? Like the first article I ever got, someone said males with ED and it was males with eating disorder. And I was like, I don't want to touch that. No, thanks. And it's just, there's so many hurdles and barriers to getting help as a male. Like I don't even want to show up in general, but then every step along the way is something else. And when CU came to me and they were like, we're putting the mental health facility down here in the front, right at the lobby of, and the coach's office is right here. Everything would be so convenient. I was like, dude, that thing needs to be 8 miles away on the opposite side of campus. No one wants to be seen walking in there, but everyone wants to go. And so normalizing that, and even at CU on a board we were just talking about earlier, but we've had 8 guys since 2000 from football alone commit suicide. So we could talk about eating disorders, but there's the mental health and the pressures and everything that, again, if I could just sit down and just blow off steam with a buddy or a coach or have that environment of like, dude, we're all struggling with the same shit. It's a different motivation, different, whatever your backstory is and why you're here. But just being able to, you hear that stat, go to a 50% mark is amazing. And it now is kind of becoming cool of like, I have a therapist, I have a mental coach or whatever it's going to be, to really kind of change just the perception of what mental health is.
I think as modern sports start to use analytics more, especially with as technology gets better, remembering that those people who are just numbers on the screen are people too. And when, you know, coaches are watching film and they're breaking down stats, that, you know, the person on the screen who is just going to get numbered is a person, and there's much more that goes on in their life and how they can handle a situation much more than, you know, their stats and their metrics. And I think that's something that's often getting lost, is that although, you know, robots and computers are creating the numbers, the people who are doing the activity are not robots. You know, they have feelings, they have tough days, and just remembering that it's a human being and not just an athlete.
I think a lot of awareness. I mean, I grew up in Boston around alcohol my whole life. I knew it was bad. The first time I went to take a drink, there was a part of me that was like, I don't know. I never had that with food. I didn't even know an eating disorder was a thing, right? So awareness, normalizing it. I mean, I was embarrassed, right? I had all these friends that had these addictions, and now I kind of felt like, whoa, I mean, yeah, it's just food, but listen, it's pretty serious. Let me try to explain it to you. So I felt like embarrassed, like almost less than at a certain point, especially with the weight class too. Like I wasn't trying to talk about it too much. So I think normalizing it so that, because mental health. If you need help, you need help. It doesn't matter what it is, like you need to seek help. And I think normalizing it so that people can come out of that isolation a little bit better could help. Weight class sports is just a different animal. I mean, I think anytime you can manipulate something to get ahead, you know, there's going to be a certain percent that's going to do that. But for me, don't cut weight, right? You have this false sense of, if I do all this to fit into a weight class, it's going to make me compete better, which is actually incorrect, right? I want to fuel myself and be optimal and train hard and be ready to compete. So I think, combat sports has come so far since I started. I mean, I was 11 years old when I first got into wrestling, right? That we're talking about like 1999. Like, it's come a long way, but it's still not there yet. And I think that, taking those tactics and cutting weight, the more that people normalize being optimal, eating, fueling yourself, and competing at your best level, the further that the combat sports can get away from kind of those old tactics of how people made weight when there wasn't as much science and information and awareness in that too.
I know we're over time, but please give these guys a hand.
Like everybody's looking at me. Are you gonna take a quick picture? I know you like to take your pictures. If you do it now, because I'm bringing the other guys up. So we're gonna bring the next panel up. And then let me just go over a little bit more for the rest of the day. So we got one more panel. We'll give them a few extra minutes. We're going to do a working lunch. So once this panel is over, go grab lunch, bring it back in here. And then what we're going to do is talk about a little bit of next steps with the coalition during lunch. And then the two panels after lunch. So stick around with us. I know it's after lunch, but stick around. We're going to talk about best practices and ideas about how to get from research on down. So we want to talk about best practices. And then our final panel is going to be on a call to action. So what do we do? Like, what's the next steps once we all leave here? So Nathan, I've been butchering introductions. That's what you're going to do. But I'm going to bring Nathan up here. So Nathan and I know each other for a while. We actually met at a hotel bar at the University of Michigan, attending one of our fellow Depression Center conferences. And we started talking. I was like, where are you from? He said, Denver. I was like, I'm from Denver, right? And we knew each other kind of, and we knew other people. So I've known Nathan for a while. He's a good guy.
Mostly.
There you go.
Great. All right. Panel, you mind hopping on up here too with me? All right. As they hop up here, I'll just do a quick introduction. I know it's hard when we're transitioning, so thanks for dealing with it. Is my volume okay first off? Yeah? Cool. You want to see if they want to chat outside the room? Yeah. Thanks.
If you're going to chat, we can't hear.
All right, just to dive in, quick introduction from me. My name's Nathan Demers. I'm a clinical psychologist. Worked clinically for a number of years, then I jumped into the startup world for just about a decade. And now I'm really lucky and feel fortunate to be working for Hope Lab, which is a nonprofit family operating foundation supporting youth and young adult mental health with an equity focus. And within that, I sit in a ventures role doing impact investing in companies supporting youth mental health. I was also an athlete, or kind of still am, but more was. I was a soccer player, played in college, was lucky enough to do some trials abroad as well. And before I introduce the panel on this topic of digital technologies and scaling mental health care, I'd love to take us on a little journey and a little exercise. Are folks up for something a little different? Getting some okays at least? All right. So if you don't mind finding yourself comfortable in your chair, if you feel comfortable, feel free to close your eyes. I want to do a little bit of time travel with us. So I'd like you to think back to February 19th, 2016, 10 years ago today. It was a Friday, just so you know. And I'd like you to really visualize and ground in that space. So think about what it was like to wake up. Where were you? What's on your nightstand? What's in your room? Who's there? And as you ground yourself in that day, I'd now like you to think about the day ahead you have in 2016. What roles and responsibilities did you have? Maybe you were in school, maybe it was work, Maybe you're going to training. And as you do that, and I know we're doing this pretty quick, but I'd love you to think about the role that technology had in that day in 2016. In your leisure time, in the way that you connect with people socially, and in your work or training. So I know we're doing this pretty quick. Keep your eyes closed if you're comfortable. Love you to fast forward to the present. Like you to think about a typical work day or weekday that you have in your life. And I'd like you to think again about what is the role of technology in those realms? In your social life, in your leisure time, in the way that you're connecting, in your work. How different may or that may not be? Where is it that it wasn't? And how might that be different for athletes in 2016 versus 2026? So you can come back for a second, and this is a quick foresight activity. As part of my work, I've jumped into the world of foresight, and I'm a huge nerd. I've gotten a bunch of certificates, and I'm looking at the study of the past and how trends influence the present, which can then influence the future. And that's not what we're here to talk about, but what I think this is really helpful to do is give us tangible examples of the ways that things are changing and how we can meet athletes where they're at. So when I think about that exercise, and I do it for myself, when I think about the way that I access and provide healthcare 2016 to today, it is drastically different. Virtual care wasn't a thing. Virtual, like teletherapy was like basically just used by the VA in rural areas. When I think about help-seeking behaviors, drastically different. Maybe people were turning to social media or Google, but now if anyone has anything wrong, where's the first place you go? Shout it out. There you go, ChatGPT. That's one of the primary use cases. I know the amount of times after playing soccer that I go to Perplexity and say, like, what's up with this pain here? And it's like, classic middle-aged male injury. It's like, huge bummer, but it's helpful. So why I wanted to focus on that is really thinking about how technology is, whether we like it or not, in our athletes' lives. And of course, there's plenty of data to support it. 90% of athletes are on social media. 30% are turning to social media for their primary source of mental health information. 30% of the primary use cases of ChatGPT and other AI models is for mental health support and mental health coaching. So whether we like it or not, it's happening. And I think a really important part of this conversation and a part of the treatment continuum is making sure advocates like us are knowing how students are using it, and then we're able to make sure that we're deploying evidence-based tools to meet athletes where they're at. And that's what we're here to talk about with an awesome group of folks. So to dive right in, would love you all to just do a quick 1-minute introduction of where you're coming from, your current work, and your why for athlete mental health.
All right, I guess I'll kick us off. My name is Ivan Chachuo, coming from New York, Bronx, New York, but I always love to say I was born in Cameroon. I'm the CEO, co-founder of The Zone, where we created a digital health platform to help you all provide better support to your athletes, and why I was a former athlete that almost fell through the cracks.
Scott Sidwell, Deputy Athletic Director at Colorado State. Ross Barr was the panelist. He is our mental health therapist for us at Colorado State. This is my 32nd year in athletics, majority of them in college athletics, 5 different institutions, 2 pro sports organizations, and really seeing the evolution of how mental health really does matter in the athletic space. And near and dear to my heart, my oldest daughter is a mental health therapist. My son-in-law is a physical therapist, and seeing how their worlds are intersecting with technology. It's great to be here today with all of you.
I'm Laura Jones. I am faculty at the University of North Carolina, Asheville. And
Sorry to interrupt. Is that mic working or no? No.
See, I was like, I'm not echoing like I normally do with the mic.
There you go.
So many. So many.
I have 2.
So is that better? Y'all can hear me? Perfect. I'm Laura Jones. I am faculty in health sciences and neuroscience at the University of North Carolina, Asheville. So not Chapel Hill. We're over in the mountains. So I am a therapist by training, but I'm also trained in neuroscience, which means I take a very physiological approach to mental health, help athletes to understand how physiologically stress and depression and anxiety are impacting their body, meaning their cardiovascular system, pulmonary system, gastrointestinal system, immune system, which all then influence their performance. So with athletics, I've been the mental health coordinator and one of the healthcare administrators with athletics for about 10 years. So in your visualization, that's what I was imagining. And also have a biofeedback neurofeedback lab there, work with peak performance. So I use technology both from a mental health standpoint as well as a performance standpoint.
My mic is good? Yeah, great. James, I guess I come at this from a different journey from most folks here through product and technology. So I spent most of my career kind of climbing the big tech ladder. I got to the point where I was running product for TikTok. I was the original architect of the recommendation engine for TikTok. But as I got to the top of that industry, I saw how flippant and reckless it is with the power and influence it has on society. So I left to start building products in the mental health space. And that journey led me to what I'm doing today with Chiro. Last May, I met one of the best sports psychologists in the world at Team USA, a guy named Jim Dorley. And we started talking about guided imagery and mental rehearsal, often called visualization. And he walked me through how 90% of Olympic athletes do 30 minutes of this every day. And it correlates to everything they do as an athlete, in training, injury recovery, emotional regulation, everything. I was blown away by it. Couldn't believe that more athletes aren't doing this. And I learned that he spends about 3.5 hours writing every single script for each of his athletes to do this work and how labor intensive it is. So with my background in, building AI products, we came together to build a tool called Chiro that essentially simulates any situation an athlete wants to rehearse in a more productive way. So they just enter it in the app and it will create a 9-10 minute audio simulation with background sounds, details specific to their team, to their playing conditions, that put them on the field and allow them to rehearse tactical decision making, skill improvement, emotion regulation, all those things that athletes deal with on the field.
Thanks. So one thing I'm really excited about with this panel is as you can see, we specifically designed it to have a lot of different perspectives and stakeholders in the space. So I think we'll have a lively discussion. But to open it up, what I'd love to just pose the question of, we know athletes are using technology, again, whether we like it or not, and would love your perspectives on what ways can technology present both opportunities and challenges for supporting athlete mental health. And feel free, anyone jump in. Would love to hear from you all on this one.
I'll go ahead and start off. We were talking earlier about this evolution in my time in the industry. Where it all started was around performance-based, right? And everything that has become measured, everything that an athlete does, how much sleep they get, how many times they eat, what do they weigh, how fast are they? They have to run 21 miles an hour twice a week. They have to do all those things. One of the things that I found, and we found in our, in our shop is that oftentimes that pressure and stress that is brought along, inherently from having to perform at a high level is oftentimes causing stress on the other side. And so when we actually get these athletes that are checking their scores every day, they're going over to our mental health therapists on our campus or Ross or others, and that it becomes a triggering effect for them. And so we haven't really completed the loop, right? We haven't completed the loop to say, this is all great stuff, but how are we using it, in a very targeted way to say, before we even get them into this, what's some of the background that we need to be aware of these young people? Because as we all know in the mental health space, anything, anytime can trigger someone. And if there was a moment in time where there was trauma in their life around something performance related, then all of a sudden, all this good stuff you're trying to do over here is causing an effect over here. So I think that's what's happening in our space.
To chime into that, I think, in two different spectrums, the access point and the data point are the opportunities, right? But then the problems and the challenges is the credibility. You all have important jobs to do, and to kind of vet out different technologies, it's not the easiest thing because us as builders on the tech side, it seems like it's businessy, right? But coming from an athlete's perspective and really understanding like what would I have used in the moment where, you know, I was thinking about the wrong things, right? And then how do we kind of help the ecosystem of sports? But I think access and data are huge in the opportunities, but the challenges are always like, is this credible? Are we giving our athletes something that can actually help them? Are we understanding how to vet these new technologies that are coming out as well?
Jump in.
Sure. I mean, I think broadly speaking, whether you're more mental performance like we are or mental health, what AI specifically unlocks is that was never really doable before is incredible personalization. You know, the kind of the digital tools pre 2024 were primarily pre-scripted content modules, things of this nature that, you know, it's hard to engage someone on something that's not hyper personalized to them and their need in that moment. So that's the power of what it unlocks. It also brings with it a ton of safety issues. Many of these products don't have guardrails. Someone shouted out ChatGPT. You know, the reason people get so addicted to ChatGPT, it's designed to be sycophantic. It's designed to please you. All of you in this room that are practitioners, you know, the role of a practitioner is not to just tell the person you're serving that they're right about everything they're saying. You have to challenge them. GPT will not challenge you. It wants you to stick with it. It wants you to open it up every second of every day. And it knows as human beings, what better way to do that than to tell us we're right about everything. So this is some of the risks that this technology brings because of how it's been pushed onto us in a pretty reckless way. And even it can serve value, but it doesn't have the guardrails that it needs to stick to the positive use cases and mitigate the negative ones. So there's a lot of potential this technology unlocks when it's used appropriately, but it's also being used recklessly across the board by a lot of organizations.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of what everyone said, I think one of the other opportunities is that athletes in this generation expect this. They expect to have technology in some way. The challenge of that is, from my perspective, one of the things I always say is the technology is only as good as the culture that it's embedded into. So you cannot use technology to replace something, but you can use it to supplement. One of the things I've heard consistently over the past few days is the power of connection and the importance of connection and community. So you can't lose that when you're using the technology. Yeah, as part of that. I mean, where I am, for me, I take a very systems approach. So if we're bringing in technology, I'm educating the administrators on it. I'm educating the administrators on it. I'm educating the coaches on it. I'm educating the athletes on it. And part of my why I got into this is because athletes who were in my classes asked me to start doing this work. I developed the program that we have in tandem with the athletes. So their voices have been part of this. And so it is getting their buy-in too, their input too, educating them on it, letting them lead the way in some ways. So.
Thanks, Ellen. I'm going to throw in a wild card question here, but I think it's going to tie nicely. We talked about some of the drawbacks, some of the pressures, some of the risks. And I also think in a world where we know young people's mental health, rates of mental health have gone up quite significantly over the last 10 years. What are the opportunities that do exist in technology as ways to reach more people, to scale care, and maybe screen, provide proper triage, connect youth and athletes to the right resources at the right time? Very, very interested in both of your perspectives, specifically coming from campuses. Sorry, Scott and Laura.
Yeah, I'll start off. Listen, I think scalability is really about, you know, folks who are going to adopt it, right? So when I think about coaches, and I just use that in a broad term, coaches, you know, that's their job, is to coach players to get better. Those that embrace the technology around mental health, mental performance, are actually finding that this is something that's going to make them a better coach. But I also think there's a large group of coaches out there who see it as a threat. Wait a minute, I'm going to get replaced on coaching, right? I mean, there's coaching technology right now in the video world where you can plug in a formation and different things and it'll go through everybody. Well, that used to be a job of a graduate assistant, right? So I think we have to figure out a way to embrace the technology for the betterment of the ultimate outcome, right? And I think athletes, coaches, administrators can do that all along the continuum, but you got to start with a bigger why. Why are we doing this? And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. And also, I mean, as you're building some of these programs out, you know, for our institution, we're a small Division I mid-major program. We're not a Power 4, Power 5 school with unlimited resources, or it feels like unlimited resources. So we've got to get really, really creative in how we do stuff and how we maximize our reach. And technology allows us to do that. Again, working with the technology to supplement what we have. Yeah, as part of that.
I'll just use one quick example that I think is relevant for a lot of folks in here. So as much as it's an issue at the collegiate level, it's really an issue at the youth level. Yeah. And when you think about travel ball and club soccer and volleyball and lacrosse, I've been very blessed to have 3 children, and they've participated in all of that and the pressures that come with that. And I'll just, I was talking to one of my nephews who's still in that world, and he's a baseball player, and he was talking about his exit velo. Okay. So if you don't know what exit velo is, it's how fast the ball comes off the bat. And he was telling me how many miles an hour the ball came off the bat. And I was listening to him. I said, "That's great, buddy. That's awesome." I said, "Did you get a hit?" Right. And so I think we've changed the dynamic in the narrative for these young people, that they're so focused on what the technology is telling them is success, that we haven't put in there that, no, the real success is just hitting the ball hard. Don't worry about how. That's a scouting mechanism. That's not an outcome, And so I think it starts down here. And by the time these athletes are coming to us, we've got some things to unpack. We really do.
I mean, I would agree with that wholeheartedly, because it builds into the identity of athletes too. So it's not identifying as just an athlete, it's identifying as the numbers as well. So
totally agreed. And I think, Scott, something you mentioned that's really important is you can't just bring technology to bring technology. You have to understand what is the problem we are trying to solve and what unintended complications might it have. And I think that's something that's easy to overlook when you're an administrator having athletes saying we want technology, and you might bring one in that incidentally creates some things that you didn't intend. But along those lines, we've also sort of alluded to this, and I'd love everyone's perspective on this, but how do administrators, coaches, athletic directors find the time, the bandwidth, and the expertise to begin to vet some of these technologies? As right now, if you go to Google or ChatGPT and type in mental health athletic performance tool or app, my experience, I hope you all agree, you would find no shortage of them. And it can be extremely difficult to know what is created with clinicians and clinical outcomes in mind versus what is out there to drive engagement and sell a product. So how do you all think about that?
I think it's first understanding what it is that you're trying to solve, specifically, right? If you don't know what metric you're trying to solve, it's going to be hard to kind of vet anything that you're trying to buy. I know me and James, we talked about it. We have peers that are raising hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're not including you all in the room. So I think if there's technical folks that you have access to, start having those conversations and understanding the technologies, because they're moving pretty fast, and it's unfortunate because it's not going to be able to replace you. You guys have such an important role in what you do for the athletes, and those touch points, it only amplifies, right? So if you can have conversations with different technical folks and have different access, please utilize those relationships, because we're going to need you all in the process of building out these technologies.
Anyone feel free to jump in?
I mean, we take, I guess, a fundamentally pretty different approach to this. And you and I were talking about this a minute ago, is, we built the product for the athlete, and the engagement has to come from the athlete. I think trying to give athletes tools that you vet and you hope they use is a losing battle if it doesn't engage the athlete directly. Like, our bar for us is as little discretionary money as college athletes have. if they're not willing to pay for our product in the way they pay for Spotify, our product's not good enough. And so we don't necessarily go to the ADs and the administrators looking for money. We go in looking for feedback. We go in looking for research. We say, hey, we went to University of Florida and said, hey, 4 of your track and field players are using this app right now. They're fine paying for it. That's how valuable they find it. Maybe you as a university want to share that cost with them. And it's only $15 a month, so it's not like a huge burden. That's another, sort of belief I have, is that you should only be paying for utilization. You should not be paying for products that just sit there and go unused. Like, pay for utilization. If it's like that's like our belief. When we do talk to coaches and administrators, the first thing we say to them is stress test our product. Before you give it to an athlete, go try to break it. Try to get it to do something that you find an issue with. Try to get it to do something that you don't think is as effective. And that's especially important with an AI tool. Once we pass that test with them, we always say stress test us first. Then we say, let's give it to a small group of athletes that you can have some oversight on, and let's prove its effectiveness. Let's prove that there's impact. Let's prove that there's measurement, that the athlete is saying, I love this and I'm engaging with it on my own. I'm not doing it because the coach is asking me to do it. I'm doing it because I find this valuable. And let's make sure that you as the coach find the way they're using it to be in line with what you're teaching. So we say stress test it first, do a small cohort second, then we could talk about giving it to more athletes. But even then, the product has to engage the athlete. We kind of take an approach, if you're familiar with the old business models of Slack or Dropbox, where they went to employers because they first went to employees, and the employees loved those products. And the employees went to the employers and said, hey, we're loving this product. Let's do an enterprise deal. So the way we're building Cairo is kind of bottoms up, starting with the athletes. The athletes are sharing it with each other. The athletes are using it. We have athletes that are doing these sessions, 10-minute sessions, every single day of the week before bed. And they're finding it effective. And then we go to the school and say, hey, look, some of your athletes are finding this effective. Do you want to be involved? Because there's also ways coaches can use it too. And so that's kind of our approach.
I go back to the why, and thinking about whether it's Asheville or the Baby Blue school down the road from you, right? Or it's Colorado State. Look, when we're actually talking to coaches and athletes, especially those that are very highly motivated, competitive, aggressive about their pursuits, what we have to find in how this technology works is, what edge does it give us? Okay. Because what we know today, and I'll use the NCAA basketball tournament as an example, is that a 16 seed can beat a 1 seed in the Cinderella, right? And you can find those things. Well, what was the edge that helped them do that? And if this is something that can unlock that because they're in a better state of mind, they're in a high performance mental state, then that's how it's going to work. But you got to understand the why, and then you got to understand the who, because your athletes are the ones that are using it. And if that's causing another problem, you've just compounded it.
Yeah, I mean, I again agree with what everybody says. I think we kind of fall somewhere in the middle. I feel very fortunate to be in an athletic department that is very close knit. We just naturally work together really well in collaboration. And so in some ways, my job in tandem with our athletic directors to narrow down the possibilities in terms of companies that we would want to work with that are person-centered, that I know the people who started the company. I can talk to them. I'm not just getting some recording anytime I call. They can give us the data that we need to go back and write grants or to be able to show other folks like this is effective. So we want companies that we can collaborate with as part of our extended family, so to speak, and that we enjoy working with. And from there, when we've narrowed it down, being able to take that to our athletes, let our athletes vet it, right? So right now, we've got, for instance, nutrition technology that I've just sent out to our athletes and our coaches just to get feedback from all of them. And I'll go sit down with groups of them just to hear their feedback on how likely they will be to use it. Because as everybody said, we don't want to purchase something that our athletes aren't going to use, right? We want it to be their voices that are driving it. We want coaches to understand how it can potentially impact their athletes and help them find that edge that can set us apart in the conference and the region as well. So.
Yeah, appreciate it, everyone. And the thing I'd add, putting on my clinical hat and investor hat, is I always like to ask a lot of questions, especially when it's on the more of the mental health side, is who's your clinical psychologist or clinician on staff that's okaying and making sure that you're using mental health best practices, that you are getting into outcomes research? Because there's some companies that, you know, they have an advisor that checks in on things once a month. And I personally think that's very different than having a clinician who's in the trenches designing all aspects of an intervention and working alongside folks who are embedded in the product world. Because if we don't have an evidence basis and engagement, one or the other, in my opinion, doesn't work. And I think there's some pretty simple ways that you can ask questions to get at that. So I want to switch gears a little bit and ask a question. Let's say you have a problem you want to solve. You find a product, you tested it, both internally with your internal stakeholders, and you've tested it with your athletes, they want it. You say, we're going to bring this on to either my higher ed institution, a professional team, or a youth sports club. How do you make sure you actually get that departmental buy-in to actually get it in the hands of students? I know I've worked in many settings that say we have this newest and greatest thing, you release it and then no one uses it. Or I ask for support and someone says, well, did you know we have this in our EAP? It's like, I had no idea, because the average utilization of an EAP is 3 to 5%. So how can we think differently about this question of actually getting things that are evidence-based in the hands of our athletes?
I mean, I think after the vetting process, I want the athletes asking me, hey, when are we going to get that? Like, I want them to be that excited about it. Or I want coaches to be like, oh, you know how you mentioned the possibility that we may be getting X, Y, and Z? When's that going to come in? So I think part of that vetting process is getting them excited about it so that you have champions out there before you ever bring it in. And I think that helps to build that culture around it, that and education and really good onboarding with it.
Who are the key champions, in your opinion, in that scenario?
Okay, it depends on if you're talking about mental health world or the
mental health
performance. Athletes. You know, there's typically athletes I work with, have a group of mental health ambassadors, so athlete representatives from every single team. And they're usually some of the leaders on the team, and they'll be some of the biggest champions for any of the mental health work that we bring in. And they're talking about it before it comes in. They're educating their peers on how to use it. They're, you know, modeling using it for others. And so in the mental health space, I think that's getting the athletes, as you were discussing too, getting the athletes really bought into it. They're going to be your biggest champions for it.
Yeah.
It's what we started with. It's cultural. Like, if you don't have a culture to support any of this technology, it's going to just fall down and not get used. We talked about this when we were prepping to come up here. Is in a different space for me now. You know, our athletic director came from outside the industry, and he was in the tech space, and he was a CEO and bought and sold companies and did all of that stuff. And one of the things he's constantly harping on our administration about is, how do you take information to create insights and turn it into action, right? And so we've done a whole technology audit. And what we found is probably 75% of the stuff that we have was the latest, greatest, you know, light bulb that came across our desk that, wow, that's going to help us win. But we never took any of the information and insights and turned it to action. And his point is that that's really the secret sauce. Is you've got to take all of that information, you got to turn it into an insight, and then you have to turn it into an action. And if you can do that, whatever the measurable is, the win-loss column or whatever, you're gonna be successful with it. I think that's an interesting dynamic.
I think in the performance world specifically, the team coach has to be bought in, because the coach is really driving the performance goals for that athlete and for their athletes. And, you know, different things you know, coaches, like when we start talking to universities, we always say, hey, if you want to start in this kind of top-down approach, let's identify a coach who's kind of really, I would say, thinking modernly about mental performance and the role of mental training with their athletes. And that's the first sort of bucket to cross off, because different coaches feel differently about this topic. And then we try to give them a wow factor. So with the Purdue softball coach, the second we showed her that she could take a scouting report where she has a game against Indiana, here's the tendencies of the pitchers they're going to face, that she has in this old Excel file. And she's like, oh, I usually try to give my athletes this Excel file to memorize it. I'm like, good luck with that. Like, that's not gonna work. So we took her Excel file and we uploaded it into our product, and it turned it into literally different simulations against every pitcher those players are going to face through 8-minute audio rehearsals. So she could just send her players a link to an 8-minute session rehearsing different pitch counts and what those pitchers are likely going to throw. And all of a sudden it takes that scouting report and brings it to life in this immersive audio first way that, you know, the athletes can engage with versus an Excel spreadsheet. And so, you know, as soon as she saw that, she was bought in, and she was like, okay, I'm down. Let's do this. Let's do, like, I want my trainers using this. I want my sports psychology department using this when they're integrating my athletes. So you got to have that kind of wow factor with the coach. But I think with performance training, the coach has to be bought in, and you have to impress them. You have to give them something that changes things for them. You have to give them something that they look at and say, wow, this is a tool that I didn't know could exist, and now I want this. This is going to make us better as a team. This is going to make us win more. I mean, at the end of the day, coaches are evaluated on winning and losing. As much as we don't want to not admit that, it is. It's a cutthroat world being a coach in today's world. And so if you show them something that can help them win more, their players hit their goals, their performance goals, they're going to be bought in.
Yeah. Anything birding?
Oh, no, I was just going to add, that's part of the reason why I asked the question originally, whether we're talking mental health or performance, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. In performance spaces, coaches want to know what their athletes are doing. It's that lovely control that coaches like to have and need to have in a lot of ways, because they're responsible for those athletes, right? And so you've got to, from a performance-based standpoint, you've got to get their buy-in, you've got to get them excited about it.
Anything to add on that one, or?
I think they hit all the key touch points.
All right, awesome. So last question, and we'll go a couple over. I don't know where Matt is, but we started late, so I'll just take that liberty. So sorry, everyone. So we alluded to it a little bit and I really liked your AD's model of actually getting information and turning those insights into action. But when you bring on tools, especially more on the mental health side as opposed to the performance side, oftentimes it's a little less tangible. It's hard to say, I got X amount of athletes counseling and now I have a better record. So how do you all make the case, and what do you provide your clients in your instances to say that this is a worthwhile investment, this is helping the athlete's mental health, and this is something, it's not a nice to have, it is a must have within our treatment continuum when it comes to mental health?
Yeah, I sit more on the health and the wellness side. And I will take a step back. I come from, like I said, humble beginnings in the Bronx, and there's no conversations of mental health, you know, growing up in Africa and coming from the Bronx and playing sports, right? So I played against pros. I was around pros my whole life until my knee shattered and the game was over for me. Nobody told me what to do. I'm not calling my dad. The first thing my dad said is, we need to go get a CAT scan, right? So that's the type of dad I had in that perspective. But you know, coming from where I come from, you're not going to raise your hand. You're not going to talk about the things. My coaches was the ones that, you know, threatened my scholarship and forced me to go speak to a provider, which changed my perspective. So when we built technology, we were like, you know, what is the issue that providers like you all are having? If you're reaching only 10% of the population, there's definitely about 30, 35, 40% of athletes that want to talk. They don't know how to take the step. They don't want to walk into that office. How do we help you reach more? That's been the big pressure test. And what does reach more mean is, hey, they're engaging with it. They're seeing providers on the platform. There's identifying how they actually feel and how that correlates to their performance, them making friends, their social beings and whatnot, right? So that's kind of how we took an approach on the health side. How do we help you actually provide real tangible access to the athletes that won't walk into your office for many other reasons? And you may just be overwhelmed and they may not have 2 weeks, right? So how do you kind of give them something that they can address in real time as they wait to kind of meet you all? So that's kind of been our approach on the health and wellness side, as we built more an ecosystem tool versus just a one focus size tool.
Yeah, I would just say that's a great statement right there, because the way I see it is with performance technology, then you have mental health technology, right? And I'll use how much an athlete sleeps and, you know, what their load management is and all that. Their sleep is probably being affected in some way from an issue that they're having. Well, if they don't sleep well, then their load management's not going to be as good, which means they're not going to perform as well. I haven't seen that anywhere where that's all connecting. And, you know, this talk about loads management, there's a million different tools out there that athletes wear to measure how fast they are, what their heart rates are, how much they have left in the tank, all of that stuff. But when you go to ask for the information, it doesn't tell you that they had a parent that's ill, or they had, you know, and so if there's a formula that can be done that says, here's the score of that athlete and how what's happening in their life is going to translate to performance, that to me would be something that every athletic director in the country would say, I want that.
And that ends up being like a recruiting tool, right? Imagine this transfer portal craziness. You don't know what an athlete is walking into, right? So he's there one day and he leaves, but there's a lot of signs that led to that prior to, right? So you can turn the health aspect into the performance aspect, and that's kind of one of our beliefs.
And I would say, I mean, going back, you and I were having this conversation earlier, I mean, around app fatigue or what have you, right? Athletes are going to use apps that they want to use and that are beneficial to them. If they're not beneficial to them, they won't use it. So one of the biggest metrics that I use is how many of my athletes are actually, or how many of the athletes are actually engaging with whatever this technology is. And yeah, just agreeing with what everybody else says around that. But I do think it's a harder space, because you can't say this many people sought help, right? I guess one of the other things I look at is how people talk about it. And just, it's a benefit of being in a smaller program, being able to listen to how the athletes are talking about the app, how they're talking about mental health. And you can see that change over time, especially if they're engaging with some of the technology. So.
Yeah, just briefly, there's not a really clear delineation and line between mental performance and mental health. These things overlap, these things interconnect. I kind of liken it to how, you know, like global warming and biodiversity collapse interconnect and affect each other, even though they are two distinct issues. Same thing with mental performance and mental health. And, you know, we see that line, like, for example, for us, one of the common use cases we see is athletes using the app to rehearse dealing with adversity. So it's like a basketball player whose shots aren't falling early in a game. They get down on themselves, right? It affects their game. And that can bleed into mental health issues because their performance is affecting them. It goes from that first quarter where they're not hitting their shots to the second quarter where their defender's ragging on them and reminding them that they're not hitting their shots, to the third quarter and halftime where a teammate is saying, hey, you're not holding your own. And it just bleeds and it just cascades. So what they'll, you know, with use Cairo for is they'll rehearse having their shots not fall and rehearsing different techniques to deal with that. For example, finding energy through their defense and kind of getting back mentally in the game through making defensive plays when the offensive shots aren't falling. Like, this is the kind of stuff we've trained our app to sort of reinforce. And this is an example where mental performance, when not dealt with, can lead into mental health issues, just like vice versa. Mental health issues are not dealt with can lead to mental performance issues. So these things are distinct, but they're also interconnected.
I'll give you, I mean, just listening to you talk, thinking about an athlete that misses that shot, misses that free throw. I would say, and I don't have any data to back this up, it's just my instinct in doing this a long time, that probably nowadays the first thing they think about is how many people are going to hit them up on social media for missing that shot. So the anxiety beyond just of what happens when you're not looking at your phone, You get off the court, and the first thing you do, you grab your phone in the locker room, and you see that there's 200 fans that are all over you about. So how do we decouple that, right? And how do we help them with those type of strategies?
Yeah, I mean, this is a different tangent related to that, but anybody here who's in an athletic department role, you two as well, please, please, please write letters to your representatives and congressmen to ban prop betting. Ban prop betting. It is a mental health disaster for athletes. It's also a disaster for the bettors. Everyone is losing except FanDuel. Everyone is losing except DraftKings. Everyone is losing except those technology companies. Your athletes are losing, the bettors are losing. Ban prop betting. You have roles, you have responsibilities as ADs. Write your congressional representatives to ban prop betting in your state.
Love it. I'm going to pull us in just to the interest of time, and I'm going to be a terrible moderator and give my own answer to that question that I posed. So sorry. One aspect that I wear, just having a clinical hat, and again, as an impact investor, any product that you are trying to solve a problem, there has to be data that you can get on the back end, whether it's how many people are screened successfully, how many people are actually connected to clinical care, and what that clinical care did. So if you can't be promised data points that can show you're moving the needle on athlete mental health, I would not recommend looking into that product. So very last questions in like 30 seconds or less for each folks. If you had a magic wand, could change anything about technology, deployment, stakeholder, interest, budgets, or anything in bringing digital technologies to support athletes, what would it be? You don't have to go in order. Anyone can jump in.
If we could take the outcomes of the data that the athletes are using in these specific apps, whether it's performance or health, and then try to find a way to tap that into their algorithm of what they're doing socially, that all of a sudden they get fed back positive reinforcement around what they're doing. I think that'd be a good
Close that loop. Yeah, not an easy thing to do. It's a magic wand.
Yeah, I mean, mine's twofold really quickly. I mean, just as we were talking about a minute ago, bridging the mental health and the performance piece and having apps that really look at and address both of those and use that data in tandem to help support athletes. And then my other is starting to take care of our coaches too, and have some of these apps, and whether they're the performance side or the mental health side, that coaches can also access and use alongside their athletes, because I think that builds buy-in and it just makes the system as a whole healthier.
Absolutely. Thanks.
I would say pay for utilization, not for access. I understand it makes budgeting harder, right? It's easy to budget for just a license fee and access to something, regardless if it's used or not, because it's a line item that sticks there and you can plan around it. When you pay for utilization, it's variable. Variable budgets are harder to deal with, but you're going to put your product partners and your vendors and your partners at a higher bar when they have to be utilized by the athletes in order to receive revenue from you. You want to obviously, like, the flip side of that is you don't want them gamifying engagement to the point where it's toxic for the athlete too. So you need to monitor that. But I believe in paying for utilization, because I think it pushes all of us who are on the other side of that, trying to sell to you, trying to give you technology and tools for athletes to make sure we're holding ourselves to a standard that they're being used, that they're being effective. I even say pay for utilization and bonus for outcomes. You know what I mean? And be willing to pay more for utilization than you would for just access. That's my 2 cents.
And Ivan, last but not least.
Technology is an ally, and let's stop waiting till things get to the worst case scenario before we do something.
Well, thank you all. I know we went over a couple minutes, but thank you. If you want to catch up with anyone or ask questions because we don't have time, please feel free to come up. Thank you all.
Thank you. And Nathan, as a dad of 3 teenagers, answering your own question, if I didn't answer my own questions, nobody would ever answer any question I ever ask. So that's all right. All right. Lunch, I think, is here. Brittany wanted to remind everybody too, up here in the front, there's a soda bar. So we've got like soda, and you can put different syrups. I wanted to call them liquors. That's not right. Different syrups into the soda. So go grab lunch, come back here. We're going to start talking about next step for the coalition. And then we've got 2 more panels on best practices and steps forward. So stay with us.